We don't just report, we connect, thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English. Welcome to ILTV on the hour. We are live from Israel with your top headlines from across the region. It's currently 7 a.m. in New York and 2 p.m. here in Israel. I'm Devo Klein, and these are the latest developments coming to you live from Israel. In a significant diplomatic development coming out of the United Nations Security Council, the United States is pushing forward a draft resolution that includes Trump's comprehensive plan for the Gaza ceasefire. The UN will vote on Monday on the draft that is framed as, quote, a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and Palestinian statehood, signaling Washington's support for a path that leads to Palestinian statehood. The conditions still include Palestinian Authority reforms and construction efforts in the Gaza Strip. The United States signed a joint statement with Arab nations in support of Trump's 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza. The language of the resolution is reportedly stronger than what President Trump himself has publicly said. Prime Minister Netanyahu has now commented on the matter. Speaking from the weekly cabinet meeting, Netanyahu had this to say on the issue. And while we wait for Netanyahu's response, we can continue and say that the cabinet...
ההתנגדות שלנו למדינה פלסטינית בשטח כלשהו מערב לירדן, ההתנגדות הזאת קיימת ושרירה, היא לא השתנתה כהוא זה. אני עודף את הניסיונות הללו כבר עשרות שנים, ועושה את זה גם מול לחצים מן החוץ ולחצים מבית, אז אני לא זקוק לחיזוקים וציוצים והרצאות מצד איש. הנושא של אי פירוז לכאורה של החלק של עזה שנמצא בידי החמאס. לא יהיה דבר כזה. גם בתוכנית 20 הנקודות או בכל דבר אחר, השטח הזה יפורז והחמאס יתפרק מנשקו. או שזה יקרה בדרך הקלה, או שזה יקרה בדרך הקשה. כך אמרתי אני, וכך אמר גם הנשיא טראמפ.
And in a separate story now, Trump continues to power ahead with his plans to normalize ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. His plan? Selling F-35s to the Saudis. Speaking abroad, Air Force One, Trump confirmed that Riyadh wants to purchase, quote, a lot of F-35s. Have a listen to what Trump had to say.
I'm looking at that. They've asked me to look at it. They want to buy a lot of 35, but they want to buy actually more than that fighter jets, yeah.
Well, the Abraham Accords getting Saudi Arabia.
And the Abraham Accords will be a part. We're going to be discussing. I hope that Saudi Arabia will be going into the Abraham Accords fairly shortly.
Now, the push for a deal between the U.S. and the Saudis comes just days before Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman arrives at the White House for high-stakes talks. The report says Trump told the Crown Prince in a phone call last month that now that Washington has brokered a ceasefire in Gaza, he expects Riyadh to take steps toward normalization. U.S. officials say the message was clear. We delivered what you asked for. Now it's your turn. The White House meeting on Tuesday is expected to focus on a possible U.S.-Saudi defense pact, and Israeli officials argue that regional cooperation with the Gulf could transform the Middle East, but not at the cost of Israel's security. Defense officials are closely monitoring the talks, with Israel's qualitative military edge protected by U.S. law. Any transfer of advanced F-35s to Saudi Arabia would require strict safeguards. Officials also stress the concern is not only the current Saudi government, but long-term regional risks, including future regime shifts or foreign intelligence penetration. And joining me now to discuss all of this and more are Ambassador Dani Ayalon, the former ambassador to the U.S. and the chairman of Silver Road Capital Group, and Kobi Michael of the INSS and Miskav Institute. Thank you both for joining us.
Pleasure, Devil.
So this deal of F-35s to Saudi Arabia, at face value, it seems like Israel's aerial dominance in the Middle East could be under threat. But that's something that normalization with Saudi Arabia could actually drastically change. Ambassador Ayalon, I'd like to start with you first. From the U.S.-Israel perspective, what's your take on this arms deal should it come to fruition?
Well, I think that it should not come to fruition, and I hope it will not only because on a legal basis, it's against the legislation that was passed, the bill that was passed by U.S. Congress, nonetheless, accepting and endorsing and supporting the qualitative military edge of Israel here. And supplying F-35 to any other country in the region, certainly a country that does not have any formal relations with Israel, is contrary to this legislation. Also, this is not the end of the Saudi requests. They also would like to have an enrichment possibility independently of other countries on Saudi soil. So these two issues, I think it's quite a tall order. Also, there's no doubt that normalization, and I would say what's more important is recognition and formal diplomatic relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia is a watershed and something that should be pursued. But I'm sure there are other ways to, I would say, to circumvent these issues of weaponry. And also we have to remember there is another, you just showed Prime Minister Netanyahu talking emphatically against the Palestinian state. But this is exactly what the Saudis would like also as a price for normalization of relations with Israel.
Absolutely. And Professor Kobi Michael, if we could just get your take on this deal of the F-35s to the Saudis. Do you agree with Ambassador Ayalon, or do you maybe have a different opinion?
I think that I intend to agree, but I have two general comments that I would like to make in this regard. First of all, there are no free meals. And we have to understand that if we want to have a normalization with Saudi Arabia, if we want to expand the Abraham Accords, if we want the American backing, but in the very same time, we are not willing to say something about the future path for the Palestinian state, or God forbidden to mention the idea of the return of the Palestinian state to control effectively the Gaza Strip one day in the future. So we have to pay another price. I mean, there are no free meals in this regard. I think that all the idea of F-35 would not have been put on the table, or at least Israel could have take it down from the table if Israel would have paid something else instead of that. But to say no to everything, it's something that just doesn't go. It cannot be. The second thing that I think that we have to understand in this regard is the American approach, or President Trump approach. And we see it in a very consistent manner when it comes to Qatar, when it comes to Turkey, when it comes to the Saudis. President Trump thinks, first of all, about the American interests. And in his perception, the American interests are, first of all, economic interests. And he believed that the American hegemony could be achieved by a sort of Pax Americana that will be established here in the region, that will provide American economic interest backed by American military might. And Israel is, one component in his perception. It is not necessarily the most important one. For sure, not all the time the most important one. And whenever he understands that Israel or the Israeli policy might endanger or sabotage his grand vision, or will become a barrier in front of the realization of his grand vision, I'm not sure that he will hesitate to forgive on the Israeli interest in that regard. So I think that we have to remember that, and we have to understand that all the relations with the American administration, the current American administration, are based on these principles.
And obviously a lot of moving puzzle pieces in this puzzle here. But Ambassador Ayalon, I'd like to go back to you and ask if you are at all optimistic that Trump can achieve normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which is where all these roads end up leading eventually, because, this is actually his second Washington visit by a Middle East official. He was recently visited by new Syrian President al-Shara, which ended positively largely, but not as positive on the topic of Israel. So, Ambassador Ayalon, how do you compare these two meetings, and are you at all optimistic?
Well, optimistic we always should remain. I would say that if we go back to the issue of Saudi Arabia and F-35, I think we should have a little bit more imagination and creative diplomacy. For instance, if the Saudis will get a security pact or a defense treaty with the United States, this may obviate them purchasing of the F-35 because they would be covered by the United States. I think also that this normalization of relations, it's also a benefit for the U.S., for the Saudis' interest, albeit that a Palestinian state for them, even as a fig leaf, even as a lip service, is very important because of the public opinion of their people in Saudi Arabia. So in this respect, if I were to advise Prime Minister Netanyahu, I would say that it's a small price to pay if we mention, by the way, it's also part of the UN Security Council resolution draft that the US is pushing, to at least accept the possibility of a political process with the Palestinians, which will achieve a permanent solution to the Palestinian question and coming to a, I would say, peaceful coexistence. And I think that if we go that route, Netanyahu, without mentioning a Palestinian state, because this would be contrary to the ideology of his coalition members. But again, diplomacy is about circling the square. And if there is a will, there is a way. I think that we must go forward. We cannot go against the United States of America. They are our only ally. And even in the United States now, Israel has lost a lot of support positions, whether it's a Democratic Party, even Republican Party, certainly among a lot of sectors of the American public. And so we do not have much leverage against the US. So we have to get the best out of it, or at least the least problematic or damaging option. And I think the path ahead is quite clear.
Interesting. So what is your take then on what Prime Minister Netanyahu just said at the weekly cabinet meeting? Because if the United States is pushing toward this deal with Saudi Arabia and of course normalization, and now they're pushing the UN draft as well to be voted on tomorrow, but Netanyahu is coming out against it. So is he just trying to appease his coalition, or is this potentially a sticking point in U.S.-Israel relations?
Well, the time is a mitigating factor in life in general, and certainly in diplomacy. So he does not have to mention a Palestinian state. Nobody is talking about a Palestinian state tomorrow. This is, if at all, will be the last stage to be discussed. First and foremost, we have to demilitarize Gaza. I hope also to de-radicalize Gaza, to disarm the Hamas and bring a new authority that can stabilize the situation through this peacekeeping or peace-enforcing force that they're all talking about, which will be, I guess, the composition is also very important for Israel, not to have their Qatar and Turkey, which are the backers of Hamas. And this may take a few years to stabilize Gaza altogether. And then when we discuss any kind of independence for the Palestinian people, they must totally revamp and restructure and reform the Palestinian Authority in terms of their education system, of accepting Israel's right to be here, changing the entire philosophy, and of course, ridding themselves of corruption, extremism, and support of terrorism.
Mm-hmm. But it's actually true what you say, because it does seem like the UN Security Council draft that the United States is pushing, it seems a little bit, preemptive, because how can we continue and discuss, phase 2 of Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan if phase 1 has not been fully complete? We have reports of, IDF troops are still being under attack. They're still identifying Hamas terrorists crossing the yellow line and enter into Israeli-controlled territory. And we're also hearing of Hamas taking control of the parts of Gaza that the IDF withdrew from. So it does seem a little bit preemptive. And actually, Professor Kobi Michael, I'd like to turn to you now. So what's your take on this draft resolution that the United States is pushing, and also the security situation inside of Gaza? Can we discuss phase 2 if phase 1 has not yet been completed?
With your permission, I would like to begin with one sentence following the things that have been said by Ambassador Ayalon.
Absolutely.
The Palestinians have so many bridges to cross until they will reach to the basic standards of having an independent Palestinian state. And Israel is backed in this regard by the current American administration and by the previous American administration and by President Trump 20 points plan, which is supported by all the Arab leaders in the region and all the European leaders, and even Muslim leaders from Indonesia and Pakistan. And it is mentioned there in the plan. And Israel, by the way, accepted the plan as is, as a whole. And Article 20 says exactly what Ambassador Ayalon said, and what appears in the proposal that the U.S. provided for UN Security Council resolution, that if things will be stabilized in the Gaza Strip, if Hamas will be disarmed, if the Gaza Strip will be demilitarized, if the Palestinian Authority will go through very significant, substantial reform process, okay, then a path towards self-determination for the Palestinian people will be opened, okay? So Prime Minister Netanyahu already said yes. So why to say in such a public manner now in the cabinet meeting to say things like that? It's just to put a finger in the eyes of the Americans and the Saudis and all the others, and to turn it over. I mean, I don't see any prospect that can come out of that. But with regard to your question, the situation in the Gaza Strip now, I think, is very fragile when it comes to the probability that the plan would be or will be realized eventually peacefully. I think that Israel has to give all the space and the time to the American administration to do it in its way until they will reach to the conclusion that water will not come out from this rock, that Hamas is not going to comply. Until then, I think that Israel has to tight the coordination with the Americans to assure that we are on the same page with the Americans with regard to the future role of Turkey and Qatar. That should be a very minimal role and presence in the Gaza Strip, and to build the legitimacy for the resumption of the military fighting against Hamas in the western part of the Gaza Strip, in parallel to the beginning of the realization of the plan in the eastern part. of the Gaza Strip, which is controlled now by the IDF. In this way, I think that we will be able to increase the chances for the realization of the plan on its entirely. And I think that the implementation of the plan on its entirely is something that serves all the strategic goals of the war that were dictated, by the Israeli government. And this is the Israeli interest to assure the realization of the plan. But I think that we have to be sober enough to understand that there will be no entity in the entire globe from edge to edge that will be willing and is capable to dismantle Hamas. Nobody will do that. The only entity that can do that and is willing to do that is the IDF. But this is not the right moment to do that. We have to build the ripeness. We have to build the legitimacy. And therefore, I think that we wisely, as Ambassador Ayalon said before, this is the truth moment of the Israeli statesmanship. Here, the Israeli leadership has to find the very delicate balance, between the need to, to satisfy the base, the coalition, or political, objectives, and the need to serve the strategic objectives of the State of Israel. And I really want to hope that the Israeli statesmanship will find the strategic compass in order to reach to the right decisions and to do things in the right way.
It does seem like cooperation between the United States and Israel is key in achieving all of these things. But Professor Michael, you mentioned earlier in your answer your analogy of Netanyahu, sticking his fingers and not exactly complying with the United States and their wishes. Ambassador Ayalon, do you think that Netanyahu is doing a good job or actually a poor job in his recent statements from the cabinet meeting? Is he agreeing with Trump or is he going against him?
Well, I totally agree with Professor Michaeli. The less he makes public announcements like that is better. If he wants to appease his coalition members, he can talk to them in privately, and certainly not over the pulpit of the Prime Minister of Israel. I think there are many ways to do it in the right way, achieving all of Israeli goals, but also tactically, we have to be smart.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, because it seems like on the surface that Netanyahu and Trump actually have a very productive relationship, and the situation that we're in right now, it doesn't look the brightest because there's just such a big gap between all these plans and all these plans for Gaza and what's actually happening on the ground is vastly different. But you can't deny that the cooperation thus far has led to this deal. So I'd like to ask just both of you just to recap on this U.S.-Israel alliance relationship. Is it headed to a good direction, or are we maybe potentially going to see a fallout? And Ambassador Ayalon, I'd like to start with you, and also if you could go back to the Saudi deal as well.
Well, there is no, I would say, question that for Israel, it's paramount to have these strategic relations with the United States, which we have always had. The difference right now, and there is no question about good relations between Trump and Netanyahu, and they should continue to work together, absolutely. But we have to remember that now, contrary to what we were used to, there are new actors that have the ear of the President of the United States, Erdogan of Turkey, Qatar, and many others, and not all of them are supporters of Israel, or quite the contrary. So it's a lot of delicate balance that we will have to go through. On the one hand, yes, we should keep the United States. I think also it's the United States interest of having a strong Israel, as we have seen it in the war with Iran, and actually stabilizing the situation in the Middle East. But at the same time, we have to remember that contrary to the past, our relationship today is not with the US government not with Congress. It's only dependent on one man, which is the president of the United States, which is Trump. And in order to keep Trump supporting Israel, I'm sure that there will be a price to pay. And I hope the price will not be too tall.
And Professor Kobi Michael, your thoughts on that as well?
I think that Israel is facing, not from today, I mean, this is a process that has begun even before. Israel is facing a very challenging days regarding the special relations with the United States, because we are losing, or we always lost, the Democrats, or at least a big part of the Democrats. We are losing some of the Republicans as well, and mainly we are losing the American society due to the demographic and cultural and political changes in the United States. So we cannot, remain very satisfied because the very good relations, the personal relations between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. President Trump will not be there forever. And we have to think about strategically, we have to think and about the long run, how to change things when it comes to the relations with the United States, because Israel cannot replace the United States. All the ideas or the thoughts that Israel can find another superpower that will replace America, okay, these are illusions that not necessarily corresponded with the reality. No Russia, neither China, or I don't know who. So this is the situation, and therefore I think that we have to avoid from doing too much provocations, and we have to understand the sensitivities, and eventually we have to see in front of our eyes the strategic goals for the state of Israel for the long run, for the long term, and not to feel that we are, almost we have almost a sort of an obsession to satisfy here and now our political constituency. And I hope that we will be able to do this required balance, because otherwise we are going to find ourselves in a very embarrassing situations that not necessarily will serve our interests.
Devo, if I can add one word, first of all, I totally agree with Professor Michaeli. I would say that the United States is certainly an indispensable for Israel, and I would say more than that. I think it's time to think about formalizing a defense treaty between Israel and the United States. It has been debated here for a long time, and many were against it because losing some of the independence, but I think the situation has changed altogether. And this is something that we need to do now, and actually leverage this good relationship between Trump and Netanyahu. A defense treaty would be a legacy that can hold for a long time.
I think it's also important that we remember that, Israel's security is not just in Israel's best interest, it's also in the best interest of the United States and the American President, Donald Trump. I want to thank our panelists for joining us today for this discussion. Ambassador Dani Ayalon and Professor Kobi Michael, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
And as a final update before we let you all go, in Gaza, troops of the Shimshon Brigade, together with Yahalom IDF combat engineers, released a video of the demolition of a kilometer-long tunnel. This is in the footage that you are seeing on your screens right now. Now, according to the IDF, the tunnel was a kilometer long and it ran a few meters deep. Now, this underground tunnel was used by Hamas terrorists to kill 3 IDF soldiers of the Shimshon Brigade exactly 11 months ago. Captain Eli Gavriel Atedgi, Staff Sergeant Netanel Pesach, and Sergeant First Class in the Reserves Hillel Diner. May they all be of blessed memory. It's fallen heroes like Hillel Diner, who left behind a young widow of just 21 years old, are still being mourned by their families and their communities And with the demolition of the tunnel in which they perished, these families can get a glimpse, a tiny glimpse of closure. And that is a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. We're here every hour on the Hour. Don't forget to scan that QR code on your screen to get all of our updates on our ILTV app. I am Deva Klein. Thank you so much for joining.
Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
U.S. and Israeli officials revealed over the weekend that an Iranian plot to assassinate Israel's ambassador to Mexico was thwarted by Mexican authorities last summer. But Ambassador to Mexico, Einat Kranz-Neger, says she's not deterred. ILTV's Devil Klein has more.
Israeli ambassador to Mexico, Einat Kranz, says she will not be intimidated after Mexican authorities foiled an alleged Iranian plot to assassinate her, describing the revelation as, quote, deeply unsettling, but insisting she will continue her work as usual. In a report by Axios, U.S. and Israeli officials revealed the plot that was foiled last summer, an attack planned as a response to Israel's attacks on the regime. The ambassador said she had only partial knowledge of the threat before it became public. And the Iranian embassy in Mexico denied the allegations, calling them, quote, a great big lie. This as the heartbreaking 1 year marked to the murder of United Arab Emirates Chabad representative Rabbi Tzvi Kogan was murdered by IRGC at just 28 years old. Had the attack against Kranz been carried out, it would have been a string of assassinations taking place a year ago. After the plot had been revealed, Israel's ambassador to Mexico showed strength and resilience in the face of terror taken to the global stage. Kranz said she will continue to represent Israel, saying, quote, this won't stop me, she said. We have a job to do, and we'll keep doing it.
And joining me now to discuss these threats is Major in Reserves Alexander Greenberg, expert on Iran at the JISS. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So, according to a New York Times report, the next war between Israel and Iran is inevitable. Analysts say new conflict is not a question of if, but when. Would you say that this is correct?
No, I wouldn't say that it is correct. Of course, conflict remains possible. That's true. And it is also true that Iran is working hard to rebuild its destroyed missile potential, but it doesn't say that Iran intends to wage a new war against Israel, in particular because Iran needs to shout loudly, like I don't know how do you translate into English, تحذيك אותי, because they have no means to thwart any Israeli attack. Suppose that a new conflict erupts, or a new war breaks out. So the IDF can reiterate without any problem the raids, the same raids it had already conducted, without that Iran can do anything because all the defense, air defense systems of Iran are destroyed.
So what you're saying is basically that they're barking louder than they can actually bite.
Yes, again, but I precise, it doesn't mean Iran is not dangerous and we should be calm and do nothing. But if we assess the real capacities of Iran, they are obliterated maybe they decide to go suicidal and to launch new ballistic missile strikes. Okay, suppose let's make a simulation and imagine what will happen. So it will award to Israel a perfect casus belli, and we can strike Iran again and strike new targets that we haven't stricken during the 12-day war. And never forget that, again, Iran has lost its strategic assets, namely the axis of resistance. They don't have Hezbollah, they don't have Iraqi pro-Iranian militias, they have only Houthis, but they haven't launched a missile for sufficiently a long time.
Now, inside Iran's leadership, there appears to be two camps, one pushing for negotiation, one preparing for direct war. Which side do you think is gaining ground? What is the regime after?
I think it's, it sounds this way to Western ears, but in fact it's two political camps that fight each other because each camp can show to its rival from the opposite camp that their way didn't work out. And it's a political game within Iran, and more than anything else, it is like a game, bad cop and good cop for Westerners. But inside Iran, there is no big difference because those who oppose the hardliners between the brackets, they themselves are no less hardliners. They differ in means, never in ends.
Now, President Trump constantly speaks of obliterating Iran's nuclear capabilities, how they've destroyed them completely. But we're hearing they actually have enough enriched uranium for nuclear warheads. Where do you think this program stands today?
I think President Trump is right. The nuclear program was factually obliterated. Of course, it can never be literally obliterated in the sense that nothing remains of the nuclear program. But given the amount of effort, manpower, resources, both financial and military and scientific, it is hardly fathomable that Iran can be able to launch from scratch its nuclear program. It's true that, again, of course, they are proud of their nuclear program. They promise they will never give it up, etc., but it highlights not so their real intentions, but rather their intentions to give up nothing. It means that no arrangement or talks with the West or with the US in the offing. The Iran won't change. This is the bottom line.
Now, we're also hearing that key ingredients for rocket fuel like sodium perchlorate from China are reaching Iran legally. So it seems Iran is navigating the sanctions and collaborating with China as well.
Yes, that's okay. They are doing that. They acquired much experience in sidelining contorting the sanctions, and of course, if they are not stopped physically, they will keep doing that. I think it's elementary. But I don't think, again, that China is interested in helping Iran just to bolster Iran's capacities. China does something for its own interests, and it is dangerous, it is bad, of course, but I don't think that this Chinese assistance will rebuild and beef up Iran's missile potential.
Major in Reserves Alexander Greenberg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And following his meeting Monday at the White House with U.S. President Donald Trump, Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara said overnight that his country will not enter direct negotiations with Israel at this time over joining the Abraham Accords. However, he did not rule out the possibility of such talks later, perhaps with U.S. assistance. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Speaking from the Oval Office, U.S. President Donald Trump concluded his meeting with Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa with positive words.
We want to see Syria become a country that's very successful, and I think this leader can do it. I really do. I think this leader can do it. And people said he's had a rough past. We've all had rough pasts, but he has had a rough past, and I think, frankly, if you didn't have a rough past, you wouldn't have a chance.
Trump added that his vision for peace in the Middle East includes the former al-Qaeda member.
I liked him. I get along with him, the new president of Syria. And we'll do everything we can to make Syria successful, because that's part of the Middle East. We have peace now in the Middle East, first time that anyone can remember that ever happening.
During the White House meeting, the two leaders discussed several key issues, including U.S.-mediated security arrangements between Israel and Syria, aimed at regulating the shared border between the countries, as following the fall of the Assad regime, Israeli forces took control of certain areas in the Syrian Golan. But when it comes to relations with Israel and the potential to join the Abraham Accords, al-Sharaa told President Trump that diplomacy between Israel and Syria will only occur through U.S. mediation. According to Ynet, Sharaa said, quote, "We are not going to enter into negotiations directly right now. Maybe the United States administration with President Trump will help us reach this kind of negotiation." Al-Sharaa told Fox News that the meeting lasted nearly 2 hours and described them as, quote, "amazing." He reported that President Trump gave him a MAGA cap and said he intends to take it back to Syria with him.
And joining us now with more on the latest along Israel's northern border is Major Avraham Levine from the Alma Research and Education Center. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let's start with Lebanon. Israel is intensifying its strikes against Hezbollah as they are in clear violation of the ceasefire agreement. The Lebanese are claiming on their part that they are slowly but surely disarming the terror group. Israel says that's not the case. I mean, what is your assessment of what's happening? And is Israel heading for another war with Hezbollah?
Well, I'd start by saying that I'm not even sure this escalation is that critical. Israel has been attacking in Lebanon for the past year since we signed the ceasefire, once or twice a day. We've counted over 640 attacks since November 27th, a year ago, in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, Beirut area, and in the Bekaa Valley. So not only in South Lebanon. So we see that happening all the time. I don't think anything changed in that sense. I'm waiting for proof. I'd like to see the Lebanese government, Lebanese army that are in charge of disarming Hezbollah. I'd like to see the weapons. Where are they going? Where are the weapons that they found? IDF was very open in showing the whole world hundreds and hundreds of missiles, rockets, anti-tank missiles, drones that we found in only a couple of months, only in South Lebanon. Now the Lebanese army has been working for a year. I'm still waiting for proof that they're finding, that they're taking, that they're destroying Hezbollah arms, Irani arms, Russian missiles in South Lebanon. Right now, we don't see that proof.
We don't see that proof, absolutely. And I do want to move on to Syria as well. You know, U.S. President Trump met yesterday with the Syrian president. Trump had some kind words for al-Sharaa. I mean, how would you characterize their meeting? And what was the purpose of the meeting?
Well, I'd start by saying we all have a tough history, or a bad past is not necessarily true. Some of the leaders don't. But I'd say I'm happy Syria is in a better place than they used to be. I hope the Syrian people can get something better of a life than they had under Assad. On the other hand, I think we should be concerned about his past, Julani's past. Everyone else can call him Ashara, but I still remember his jihadist nickname, El Julani. Maybe that's the reason he doesn't want to move on to the Abraham Accords so fast. But seeing ex-Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, visiting New York and Ground Zero last week, and visiting the White House now, leaves me with concerns about our security. And I think that's where Israel should stand. We do have common interests with Julani. We all want a stable country neighboring our northern border. We all want the weapons coming in from Syria to Hezbollah to stop. Giuliani's working on that, and IDF is working on that. So in that sense, I think we should negotiate with him about better security understandings, about the border. But I guess I agree with Giuliani. A peace process is yet to start.
And al-Shara, or Giuliani, he was constantly saying that he wants peace with Israel. But in his meeting with Trump in recent weeks, he's been a lot more cautious with his rhetoric. I mean, why do you think that is? And do you foresee a future where Syria will join the Abraham Accords?
Well, you have to remember his past and his alliances internally in Syria. And I think when half of your army commanders have jihadist history, I think he's careful to say, I'm going to jump in with Israel immediately. And he's taking it step by step. I think it's extremely smart on his side to not rely only on Erdogan and to look for more partnerships and cooperations with Europe as well as US, representing himself well as a new leader and allowing everyone else to put aside his history. I think that's smart on his side. We have to be careful and remember who he was and be prepared for what happens if he doesn't hold up and is not able to bring together all the different parts of Syria and continue the battle inside. There's a way to go before he has a stable country in his hands.
So still a long ways to go until absolute peace in the Middle East, as Trump likes to say. Major Avram Navin, thank you so much for your insights today.
My pleasure.
And as Israel continues to mourn the fallen hostages whose bodies have been returning over the past few weeks, one name that has again captured the nation's attention is Hadar Goldin. Goldin, who was an officer in the IDF, was killed and taken into Gaza during the 2014 war. His remains were returned this week, allowing his family and the country to finally lay him to rest. Our correspondent, India Naftali, is live in Hostage Square with more. India, what can you tell us?
Yes, Lidar, I'm here in Hostage Square, where flags and posters are still being hung in honor of the fallen hostages who still have not been returned. One of those fallen hostages who did return this week is, of course, Hadar Goldin, whose funeral happened this morning at the Kfar Saba Military Cemetery. Now, they already had a funeral for him back in 2014 when they had enough proof of death to hold the ceremony, but now that his body's returned, they're giving him a proper burial. It's a somber morning of closure in the city of Kfar Saba in central Israel. Thousands attended the funeral of IDF soldier Hadar Goldin. 11 years have passed since he fell in battle in southern Gaza during Operation Protective Edge. His place of burial was declared as unknown. The 23-year-old soldier was killed in 2014 when Hamas terrorists ambushed his unit in a tunnel attack. His body was kidnapped and held hostage in the Gaza Strip for more than a decade. Today, his family, friends, and commanders gathered to honor his memory. At the funeral, IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir made a powerful declaration that Operation Protective Edge is finally over.
בהצדעה ובהרכנת ראש אנחנו מלווים היום את הדר בדרכו האחרונה שלה היה ראוי מזמן. לוחמי סיירת גבעתי, חברי הצוות של הדר, לחמתם לצידו במבצע צוק איתן. התגייסתם ונלחמתם גם במערכה הנוכחית בגבורה. לכם, כמו לצה"ל כולו ולמדינה, המעגל נסגר. מבצע צוק איתן הסתיים.
Hadar's mother traveled the world advocating for his release, even speaking before the UN. Here's what she shared today about how they persevered for so long.
הדר, חיכינו לך 11 שנים. זה המון זמן. המון. אין לי באמת הסבר איך עשינו את זה, חוץ שבכל רגע ששקענו, היה מישהו במשפחה ואומר, היה קופץ ואומר, אבל מה הדר היה אומר? בדרך כלל זו הייתה הילד. אז אנחנו פה בגלל כל מה שהשארת לנו, כל הוראות ההפעלה שלך, ומי שאתה.
The ceremony reflected Israel's deep-rooted commitment to never leave a soldier behind. It's a national promise that every fallen troop will be brought home, no matter how long it takes. Hadar Goldin, who became a symbol of this principle, has finally been laid to rest.
The Gaza ceasefire plan is inching forward, but only slightly, as the fate of the terrorists on the IDF-held side of Gaza remains unresolved, and Hamas continues to claim it's searching for 4 slain hostages that are still being held in Gaza. Breaking all this down is ILTV's Kalev Ben-David with more.
The return this week of Lieutenant Hadar Golden's body from Gaza after 11 years proved another benefit resulting from the ceasefire that ended Israel's 2-year war with Hamas. But it came amid increasing signs of strain on the agreement that raised serious concerns over how it can move forward. Hamas has still failed to return the remains of 4 more hostages, 3 Israelis and 1 Thai worker, in violation of the terms of the ceasefire. Israel has said that until all the hostages are returned, it won't resolve another outstanding issue: the fate of some 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding out in tunnels beneath Rafah in IDF-held territory. Prime Minister Netanyahu met with President Trump's advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner on Monday and reportedly worked out a deal that would see the terrorists be given safe passage to a third country. But no nation has stepped forward willing to take them in. No country has also publicly agreed to take part in the Arab-Muslim International Stabilization Force that is supposed to secure a post-Hamas Gaza. In the meantime, U.S. commanders at the Civilian Military Command Center in Kiryat Gat are said to be coordinating with Palestinian militia groups in Gaza opposed to Hamas, although the State Department denied reports that Kushner met personally with one of their leaders, Yasser Abu Shabab. The Gaza ceasefire plan increasingly looks like a complex jigsaw puzzle with some key pieces missing. And with that picture incomplete, Hamas is stepping into the vacuum, retrenching, rearming, and still posing a threat to Israel and the IDF.
Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer has announced his resignation after serving 3 years in office. Dermer was Prime Minister Netanyahu's closest aide, making his departure from the role impactful for the Prime Minister's political ambitions. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer has officially stepped down from his role as Prime Minister Netanyahu's top aide, a role he served in for over 3 years. In his resignation letter personally addressed to the Israeli Prime Minister, Dermer said that the current government will be remembered for 2 things. The first, the October 7th massacre, and the second, the subsequent management of the 7th Front War, which lasted for 2 years. Dermer added, quote, "In our darkest hour, the people of Israel had worthy leaders." Dermer praised Netanyahu's, quote, "experience and strong leadership," saying he stood up to pressure at home and abroad, adding, quote, "When the truth comes out and the facts are known, I am confident that appreciation for your leadership will be even greater." Dermer served as one of Netanyahu's closest advisors and is the former ambassador to the United States. Upon resignation, Dermer said he had fulfilled his mission to confront Iran's nuclear threat, strengthen Israel's alliances, and help bring hostages home. He praised the IDF's resolve and said he remains confident in Israel's future, saying, quote, "The light of our eternal people will continue to burn bright for generations to come." While stepping down from the government, Dermer will operate as a special envoy for Netanyahu and remain involved on certain issues, such as efforts to expand the Abraham Accords, according to the Times of Israel.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week. And today we once again have the pleasure of hearing from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, as she brings us the latest highlights and inspiring updates from the fellowship's ongoing work.
Shalom Shalom from here in Israel. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are 2 fellowship projects that you should know about this week. Number 1, the fellowship learned that in the city of Tiberias, there were many people who were suffering from food insecurity. After 2 years of war, there were people suffering. They couldn't afford food, and they couldn't find basic food items. And so the fellowship opened up a soup kitchen. And so now, in the city of Tiberias, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is distributing over 150 food boxes every single day to people in need. Number 2, I want you to meet Valentina. She's 85 years old, and she's just one of so many people who get helped by the fellowship. She's been living alone for over 2 years since her husband died. She has no one to visit her, no one to help her, and we learned recently she doesn't have enough to buy both her medications, to pay her rent, and to buy food. And every single month, a volunteer delivers to Valentina a food box with everything that she needs. This is saving lives physically and spiritually. Well, there you have it, friends. There are 2 fellowship projects that you now know about. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more updates on what's happening here in the Holy Land at the fellowship. Shalom.
Nefesh B'Nefesh, together with Israel's Ministries of Aliyah and Integration, of Health, of the Negev Galilee and National Resilience, and the Jewish Agency for Israel, are back again with another MEDEX event, but this time in Australia. The wide range of services and opportunities featured at the MEDEX events highlight just how essential these gatherings are. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
The MEDEX events are back and bigger than ever. This time it's the Jewish community of Australia taking center stage with the unique opportunity to connect and integrate into Israel's medical landscape. More than 100 physicians attended the MEDEX Australia events as Israel continues to expand its global initiative to recruit top medical talent.
The IMAP, the International Medical Aliyah Program, continues to grow and expand worldwide, and we're now in Australia. It is an honor to be part of this vital program and a privilege to meet such inspiring Olim.
Israel is facing a critical shortage of medical professionals, and the MEDEX events are helping to address that need. These gatherings offer physicians a streamlined, one-stop-shop experience, including credential recognition, job interviews with Israel's leading healthcare institutions, and guidance on grants, licensing, and relocation, all under one roof. The MEDEX events, an initiative of the International Medical Aliyah Program, offers a service unlike any other. And with the inauguration of the Australia MEDEX event, these opportunities are nothing short of revolutionary.
MEDEX has set up some interviews for me to be able to sit. I've been able to do my documents to get notarized. I've met with the Ministry of Health. So MEDEX has organized something that I can come to as a one-off stop, and I'll be ready to make Aliyah next year.
For some, MEDEX is more than just a networking opportunity. It also offers the chance to integrate into Israeli society.
The future for our children is Israel, and I also think that if you're going to integrate into Israeli society, you need to come over, you need to work in Hebrew, and I guess that's the only way you're really going to be able to improve your language enough to be able to fit in life.
Sometimes what sticks the most with the attendees at the event are the fast and efficient services that are usually a headache.
It's been incredibly practical. So just over there, there's 10, 15 different hospitals in Kupat Halim that we've been able to meet with. So I've met with sort of 5 or 6 of them and gotten a sense of how they work and how I might be able to get a job there one day, and training and all that sort of thing. And I've got my degree with me here, and I'm in line to try and get it notarized as well, which just streamlines the process, which has been really great.
After multiple successful MEDEX events across North America and Europe, the IMAP program aims to expand even further, reaching even the farthest communities like the one down under. Israel's Minister of Aliyah and Integration, MK Ophir Sofer, said he expects the MEDEX events to grow rapidly across the globe. But it's not just the attending physicians that gain something from this event. The MEDEX event showcases another step in reinforcing national resilience, not only in security, but also in health.
Turn up the volume. Hi, this is Moshe Leon, Mayor of Jerusalem. If you are looking for a new place to call home, Jerusalem, the beating heart of Israel, a city of history, culture, and innovation, is a city for you. My team and I are waiting for you with many special benefits for new residents. Now is the time. Make Aliyah.
Israel is strong and growing. Now more than ever is the time to make Aliyah.
Back to ILTV on the hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. In a significant diplomatic development coming out of the United Nations Security Council, the United States is pushing forward a draft resolution that includes Trump's comprehensive plan for the Gaza ceasefire. The UN will vote Monday on the draft that is framed as, quote, a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, signaling Washington's support for a path that leads to Palestinian statehood. The conditions still include Palestinian Authority reforms and construction efforts in the Gaza Strip. The United States signed a joint statement with Arab nations in support of his 20-point plan to end the war. The language of the resolution is reportedly stronger than what President Trump himself has publicly said. The question looms large in Israel, with Washington now signing a document that explicitly promotes a pathway to Palestinian statehood. Is this possibly a turning point in U.S. policy? And what will it mean for Jerusalem's firm opposition to any such framework? And while we wait for Jerusalem's response, Trump powers ahead with his plans to normalize ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. His plan? Selling F-35s to the Saudis. Speaking abroad, Air Force One, Trump confirmed that Riyadh wants to purchase, quote, a lot of F-35s. Have a listen.
I'm looking at that. They've asked me to look at it. They want to buy a lot of 35, but they want to buy actually more than that fighter jets, yeah.
Well, the Abraham Accords getting Saudi Arabia.
And the Abraham Accords will be a part. We're going to be discussing. I hope that Saudi Arabia will be going into the Abraham Accords fairly shortly.
The push for a deal between the U.S. and the Saudis comes just days before Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman arrives at the White House for high-stakes talks. The report says Trump told the Crown Prince in a phone call last month that now that Washington has brokered a ceasefire in Gaza, he expects Riyadh to take steps toward normalization. U.S. officials say the message was clear. We delivered what you asked for. Now it's your turn. The White House meeting is on Tuesday and is expected to focus on a possible U.S.-Saudi defense pact. Israeli officials arguing that regional cooperation with the Gulf could transform the Middle East, but not at the cost of Israel's security. Defense officials are closely monitoring the talks, with Israel's qualitative military edge protected by U.S. law. Any transfer of advanced F-35s to Saudi Arabia would require strict safeguards. Officials stress that concern is not only the current Saudi government, but long-term regional risks, including future regime shifts for foreign intelligence penetration. And the ceasefire in Gaza has been holding over the weekend, but not without incident. The IDF confirmed the elimination of a terror operative who crossed Gaza's yellow line and entered the IDF-controlled area. As the terrorist approached troops, he was quickly identified and eliminated. The IDF added it remains deployed in Gaza in accordance with the ceasefire guidelines and will continue removing any threats. Troops of the Shimshon Brigade, together with Yahalom IDF combat engineers, demolished a kilometer-long tunnel over the weekend. This in the footage that you are seeing on your screens now. Now, this underground tunnel was used by Hamas terrorists to kill 3 IDF soldiers of the Shimshon Brigade exactly 11 months ago. Captain Eli Gavriel Atedgi, Staff Sergeant Netanel Pesach, and Sergeant First Class in the Reserves Hillel Diner, may they all be of blessed memory. Fallen heroes like Hillel Diner, who left behind a young widow of just 21 years old, are still being mourned by their families and communities. And with the demolition of the tunnel in which they perished, these families get even the tiniest glimpse of closure. But there are families who have yet to receive closure, as the body of Meni Godard, age 73, was returned from Hamas captivity over the weekend. 3 hostages still remain. Staying hostage Dror Or, Master Sergeant Ran Gvili, and Thai national Sudisak Rin Talak. And that is a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for more updates, or scan the QR code on your screen to get our ILTV app. I am Devo Klein, and thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Gravelazi, and coming up in today's newscast. The ceasefire may be holding in Gaza for now, but the fighting has not stopped. U.S. President Donald Trump appeals to the Israeli president to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And not just in Gaza, violent clashes between Israelis and Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas announced that they will transfer an abducted body they supposedly located north of Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip at 8 p.m. Israel time. Like previous releases, the body will be received by the IDF and transferred for a forensic analysis. There are currently 4 hostages still being held in captivity. And meanwhile, the ceasefire is holding in Gaza, but the southern city of Rafah remains a flashpoint. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
Over the past 24 hours, IDF troops eliminated 4 terrorists along the Yellow Line in Gaza. In Rafah, soldiers identified 4 armed operatives emerging from underground tunnels where hundreds of gunmen remain trapped. 3 gunmen were struck and killed with no injuries to IDF personnel. And in a separate incident in Khan Yunis, troops opened fire on another terrorist who crossed into Israeli-controlled territory, removing an immediate threat. The army says these terrorists were part of the approximately 200 terrorists that are still hiding in the, quote, terror pockets in Rafah. Additional IDF strikes targeted houses and terror infrastructure beyond the Yellow Line. The latest clash comes after Israel and the U.S. reached a deal to deport 200 Hamas terrorists from the tunnels, but no country has yet agreed to accept them. Israeli officials say that any decision will be made in coordination with Washington. Elsewhere in Gaza, efforts are continuing to locate the bodies of the remaining 4 Israeli hostages. The International Red Cross entered the Yellow Line in search of the remains, with Hamas terrorists being seen in the streets, along with bulldozers and other heavy machinery, in an apparent effort to uncover the Israeli hostages' remains.
And U.S. President Donald Trump has sent a letter to Israeli President Isaac Herzog requesting a full pardon for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his ongoing corruption trial. The letter was made public by the U.S. president, and the issue is now on Trump's agenda after he first raised his appeal to Herzog in the Knesset last month. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
In his letter to President Herzog, President Trump described the case against Prime Minister Netanyahu as a political, unjustified prosecution and called on President Herzog to let Netanyahu unite Israel by pardoning him. Trump went on to praise Netanyahu as a formidable and decisive wartime prime minister and said his leadership was crucial in the recent peace efforts in the region. Herzog's office responded that any pardon request must follow established legal procedures and can only be submitted by Netanyahu or his family, a step that has not yet been taken. The letter follows Trump's November 2nd comments on CBS News, where he said his administration would help out with Netanyahu's trial. The Trump letter sparked political debate in Israel. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir supported Trump's call, while opposition leader Yair Lapid posted that Israeli law requires an admission of guilt before a pardon can be granted. Netanyahu faces corruption charges in 3 cases, including breach of trust, fraud, and bribery. In his letter to Herzog, Trump described his plea as a key topic from his October 13th speech in the Knesset.
Hey, I have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon?
In that same speech, Trump claimed the pardon issue was unplanned.
By the way, that was not in the speech, as you probably know. But I happen to like this gentleman right over here, and it just seems to make so much sense. You know, whether we like it or not, this has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. This has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. And cigars and champagne, who the hell cares about that?
The Trump letter has been received by President Herzog. Now the question is, how will President Trump respond if his request is rejected by the Israeli president?
And joining us now with more on U.S. President Donald Trump's appeal to the Israeli president to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is advocate Michael Pardam, Vice Chairman of the Board of the Movement for Quality Government. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So this is quite unprecedented, I think. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a first, I think, of a U.S. president making such a request. I mean, what do you make of this?
Yeah, it is unprecedented that the president of a foreign country would be making the request of the president of Israel. We don't have any precedent for this, but this is a president without precedent, you might say.
Yeah. And, you know, it's no secret that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump share a very close friendship, a very close relationship. But is there something perhaps more going on here? You know, why would Trump do this for Netanyahu?
Well, a lot of people are asking themselves that question. He certainly knows something about the case. He's been given an update, and somebody has helped him formulate that letter. Somebody has put into his mind that this is lawfare, similar to what he believes he encountered in the United States. I don't believe that's the case, but then people say, okay, well, if he's going to do a favor for the president of a foreign country or the prime minister of a foreign country, what is he getting in return? He's a very transactional president. So there are many, many question marks surrounding this unprecedented move.
Many question marks, although at the end of the day, it could just be because of their close friendship. I mean, we really just don't know at the moment.
Well, you know, one of the positive aspects, there are many aspects to this whole situation, but one of the positive aspects is the very close relationship between the U.S. and Israel. There's no doubt about it that that relationship has been tremendously supportive of Israel, and I think is very helpful in Israel in combating, after 2 years, and emerging what I would say to be victorious against its multiple enemies. So it's nice to see that that close relationship does exist. And I wouldn't, be cynical about that, because we've been through a very difficult period. And I would also add that most of the people, maybe even a great majority of the people, would like this trial to be resolved one way or another. So this is a short cut or a short circuit, which I don't think will fly, but it does echo, I believe, sentiment that, this trial is dragged on way too long and should come to a conclusion.
And, we heard President Trump ask the president for a pardon during sort of an impromptu moment in his speech to the Israeli Knesset, which he said really was just sort of off the fly. Now it's official. There's an official letter. So how likely is it that President Herzog will comply with this request? And what does it mean, from a legal perspective? I mean, what happens next?
Well, I think that there's he made it somewhat of an analogous situation in calling it lawfare, an unjust prosecution of the president. There's a huge difference between Israel and the U.S., and I would make 2 points in this regard. One, there are no political appointees here. The legal system doesn't have elected officials. The attorney general who initiated the lawsuit was appointed by the prime minister, was his close ally in many respects. I don't think you can characterize this as lawfare. The other thing is that the president's power, in Israel's president's power, is very broad. But the law is very clear. The president can pardon an offender. He can pardon a criminal. That's his power of pardon. So there is a question whether, and the procedure is usually that the person himself asks the president, which Netanyahu hasn't done.
So just one minor correction. You said that the Attorney General was appointed by the Prime Minister, but I think this particular Attorney General was actually appointed by the previous administration and was allowed to stay on, although... Right.
The case was initiated by Avichai Mandelblit. Let me just clarify that. If it's not, Avichai Mandelblit was appointed at the recommendation of Netanyahu. There is a process for appointing it. And was not considered a political appointment, although it was considered an appointment of somebody who was very close to Netanyahu. Yeah. And so the fact that this person was the one, the current Attorney General inherited the trials. She wasn't in to initiate the trial. So she cannot be held responsible for initiating the proceedings. And the fact that it's taking so long for the courts to run its course, for the trials to come to a conclusion, is something I think that we have to deal with. I think that's something that also in the U.S. they don't quite understand how many years trials can go on. I think it's been, but you know, the prime minister conducted a war and was on trial at the same time, and in many regards successfully. So who knows? Maybe it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely, and President Trump certainly thinks so.
I cynically say that.
Yeah, President Trump certainly thinks it's the right move. Advocate Michael Parham, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Have a good one.
Turn up the volume. I am Chaim Biros, Mayor of Modi'in and Chairman of the Federation of Local Authorities in Israel. It's time to join us in Modi'in, City of the Future. We are waiting to welcome you to our young, modern, innovative city with great schools and, of course, all the benefits. Hope you will make Aliyah soon and join our Olim community who are so happy to call Modi'in their home. Now is the time to make Aliyah. See you soon.
Israel is strong and growing. Now more than ever is the time to make Aliyah.
Former hostages Aviva and Keith Siegel testified before the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva, recounting their harrowing experiences in Gaza. Aviva Siegel, held for 51 days, told of young female hostages who were repeatedly sexually assaulted by Hamas terrorists. She described the trauma these girls faced, including being threatened with death if they spoke out. One of the girls was taken to the bathroom and assaulted, Siegel said. She had to endure horrific abuse and was forced to pretend everything was fine. Aviva's testimony highlighted the brutal conditions and crimes committed against hostages, bringing international attention to Hamas's treatment of captives in Gaza. The Siegel's statements come as part of global efforts to document abuses and seek accountability for the terror attacks of October 7th. Let's take a listen.
I'm a witness of one of the girls that was with us, that the Hamas terrorist took her into the bathroom, told her to get undressed, came into the shower with her, and forced her to do oral sex on her. I'm a witness of one of the girls that was forced to take a shower She's 16 years old. She's never, ever showed anybody her body. The Hamas terrorist just stood there and stared at her and smiled.
And one of Israel's most influential security figures of the past 5 years, Mossad Director David Barnea, has announced he will step down in June 2026. Barnea, who led some of Israel's most sensitive intelligence operations and served as a key architect of the hostage talks in the war with Hamas, formally notified Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of his decision. ILTV's India Naftali has more for us. India, what can you tell us about Barnea's decision?
Well, Lidar, what we do know is that for months, David Barnea has been at the center of Israel's most critical negotiations, from the peace talks to the return of the hostages. But he's also the man who oversaw the famous pager operation. So yes, after years of being one of the most important decision makers in Israel, the Mossad director says his time leading the agency will come to an end next year.
Mossad Director David Barnea has formally asked to step down in June 2026, with the Prime Minister's office confirming that the search for his successor will begin in the coming weeks. Barnea has led the Mossad since 2021 and is the last senior defense official still in office from the time of the October 7th attacks. Unlike other security chiefs who resigned, Barnea was not considered directly responsible for the intelligence failures of that day. In his tenure, Barnea oversaw high-profile successes, including the pager operation against Hezbollah and multiple other covert missions deep inside enemy territory. But he also became a critical player in the hostage negotiations, serving as Israel's lead representative in talks in Doha, Cairo, and Europe. Barnea was involved in every major stage of the hostage deals. 3 candidates are now being considered to replace him. The first is Major General Roman Goffman, the Prime Minister's military secretary. Second is the Mossad Deputy Director, known only under the alias Aleph. And third is a senior operations official referred to as Chet. In the Mossad, the real names of high-ranking officials are classified for security reasons, so they are publicly identified by a single Hebrew letter. Once a new director is chosen, there will be a planned transition to ensure a smooth handover of responsibilities. In general, most Mossad directors serve anywhere between 4 and 6 years. Barnea had earlier requested that his term not be extended beyond its original timeframe. His time leading the Mossad is viewed as one of the most intense and complex periods in the agency's history.
And the Israel Security Forces said today it arrested around 40 Palestinian terrorists from Bethlehem that were planning imminent attacks against Israelis. Meanwhile, the IDF is conducting a huge 2-division exercise in Judea and Samaria in what was described by the army as an unprecedented drill for operation readiness on the Eastern Front. While joining the exercise, IDF Chief Eyal Zamir also condemned recent violent incidents in the territories in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir visited the exercise in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley, involving the Judea and Samaria Division and the Gilad Brigade. He was accompanied by Central Command Chief Avi Bluth. During the visit, he held a situational brief with field commanders and underscored the importance of operational readiness in the theater. The exercise, Zamir said, is the first of its kind in the IDF. It tests the new Eastern Division established as a lesson from the war. One of the lessons from October 7th is that responsibility for defense and our security concept must change. We prevent threats while they are forming. That is what we are doing here. Zamir said the scenarios we have practiced in recent days are ones we must never allow to happen. Zamir said we must act to neutralize the threat before it reaches our doorstep. We will reinforce forces where needed to continue disrupting terror and prevent the next attack. The IDF chief also condemned recent violent incidents in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians, saying, "I strongly reject these acts. The IDF will not tolerate a criminal minority that damages a law-abiding society. These actions cross a red line, divert our forces from their mission, and contradict our values. We will deal with them severely until justice is served." Video from a recent attack on an industrial zone near the village of Beit Lit shows dozens of extremists setting vehicles on fire. During the incident, 10 vehicles were torched, along with a warehouse and a plastic factory. 4 Palestinians were reportedly injured in beatings and stones thrown by extremist elements. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has now spoken out on the issue of Israeli extremist violence, saying there's some concern about events in the West Bank undermining efforts to maintain the ceasefire in Gaza.
And moving to another front, as tensions begin to heat up again with the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Iranian regime is putting on a show of strength, releasing propaganda videos in Hebrew and showcasing its ballistic missile reserve. But the reality on the ground tells a different story. The details in the following report.
Iran has created a new Hebrew language propaganda film that boasts of its supposed victories over Israel during the 12-day war last June. The 26-minute video, titled Missiles Over Bazan, was made by Iran's Tasnim news agency and presents the story of the Iranian attack on the Bazan oil refinery in Haifa. As such, the video sourced footage of missile hits from social media and also includes interviews with senior Iranian officials, all claiming they caused heavy and significant damage to Israel. According to Tasnim, the film aims to present the truth on the battlefield in contrast to the image conveyed by Western and Israeli media. Adding to this projected image of strength, Iran opened a missile exhibition in Tehran on Wednesday to mark the country's Aerospace Week. Footage showed missiles, drones, and other military equipment on display at the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force Museum.
خودمون شروع کردیم زمانی که ما تحریم بودیم سیم خاردار هم نمیتونستیم وارد کنیم شروع کردیم به ساخت این موشکایی که اینجا میبینید و امروزه در همه حوزه‌های زمین به زمین موشکی که مورد نیاز باشه خودمون میسازیم طراحی میکنیم و استفاده میکنیم که شما تو عملیات‌های وعده صادق 1 و 2 و 3 نمونه‌های اینها رو
Indeed, Israel has raised serious concerns that since the 12-day war, Iran is racing to rebuild its ballistic missile program and its nuclear program, pouring billions into the endeavor, even at the expense of its own citizens. Currently, Iran is grappling with its worst water crisis in decades, with officials warning that Tehran, its capital city of over 10 million people, may soon be uninhabitable.
اگر باران نباره ما در تهران در آذر ماه باید جیره بندی کنیم. تازه معلومه جیره بندی کردیم اگر بازم نباره که دیگه اصلا آب نداریم. باید تهران رو خالی کنن.
The Iranian people are already struggling with the weight of a crippled economy due to sanctions over the regime's nuclear program, as well as recurrent electricity, gas, and water shortages, which the regime fears could lead to massive internal unrest. And so, as the Ayatollahs try to convey business as usual to the world, the latest water shortage and the regime's inability to provide basic needs for its citizens shows a very different reality.
And in other news, Americans for Ben-Gurion University has launched David Ben-Gurion Speaks, an AI-powered video series that brings Israel's founding prime minister to life. Let's take a look.
Hello, friends. I am David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. I believed Israel's future would be tested in the Negev, this vast desert covering half our land. It offered space for Jewish immigrants, for agriculture, for industry. For me, it was the ultimate test of the Zionist spirit, taking barren land and making it bloom. Here, security, growth, and destiny would converge. In 1969, a university was founded to be the engine of the Negev's growth. After my passing in 1973, it took my name, Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. And what became of this university is a story I will tell you next.
And a major shakeup could be coming in Israel's media landscape. Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced that Army Radio, the iconic military station broadcasting since 1950, will be shut down by March 2026. Katz says the station has strayed from its original mission as a voice for soldiers, turning into what he called a platform for anti-IDF opinions. He argues the move is about restoring focus and morale and national unity, not silencing critics. The decision comes amid broader government reforms aimed at restructuring Israel's media environment. Supporters call it a necessary reset. Critics warn it threatens press freedom. Army Radio, known for its unique blend of military reporting, music, and cultural programs, has been a training ground for generations of Israeli journalists. Press groups and station leaders have vowed to fight the closure in court, calling it, quote, a blow to democracy. For now, the plan still needs full government approval and could face legal challenges before March. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Rainy showers and thunderstorms are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 16 degrees Celsius or 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see rain showers and cloudy skies alongside steady temperatures with highs of 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Winter has finally arrived, and that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel, and you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Madar Gravelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.
Welcome back to the ILTV News Podcast. I'm Mayan Hoffman, Executive Editor of ILTV News, and I'm happy to see all of our viewers and all of our listeners. I have with me today Mati Gil, the CEO of Ion Labs, a special venture studio located in the heart of Jerusalem. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
So I want to get started, by actually learning a little bit more about you personally, Mati.
Sure.
You and I have known each other a few years, but we've never really had the chance to talk much about life and family. So tell me, where are you from originally, and who are you?
Who am I? That's a more philosophical question, but I'm an Israeli American. I was born in the United States in Ohio, so actually the real United States, the one between the two coasts, the real America, like we used to say. And we made Aliyah when I was 12. We actually came here for an exploratory year and then decided to stay here, grew up in Jerusalem, did 6 years in the military, and then 4 years working in public service as a chief of staff to a minister in the Israeli government in the cabinet, and then decided to move over to actually gain some real skills in industry and move to work at Teva Pharmaceuticals. Chose Teva because it's Israel's best company, biggest company, but also the healthcare industry really called me in that aspect. So I am a lawyer by training with an MBA, but haven't actually practiced law, and was part of legal management for Teva, part of various different roles in the headquarters, until we decided to put together a whole program to help Teva reconnect with the innovation industry here in Israel, and that was part of the philosophy and the story of building Ion Labs partnership, which I'm sure we'll get into. But even more importantly, I'm a father of 3 children, husband to Chagit. 2 of my children are actually right outside here, so it's the summer times and we get to hang out with them more than usual. And so, yeah.
So, you mentioned Ion Labs. I talked about it for 1 second in the introduction. What is Ion Labs? Explain to people what this does.
So Ion Labs is a venture studio where we basically build startups upon the thesis of 3 things. Number 1 is that AI and computational technologies are becoming more and more important to the way that we discover and develop new drugs and bring them to market and hope to new patients. Secondly is that Israel is increasingly becoming an important place for drug discovery and development research because of that equation of tech becoming more important to the biotech equation. And third is that the way to build great startups is by doing a co-development model. And we brought into our partnership 4 big pharma companies, Pfizer, AstraZeneca. For them, it was their first R&D investment in Israel as part of Ion Labs, together with Merck and Teva that obviously have a long history of building startups in Israel and working in the Israeli ecosystem. 2 venture capital firms, Israel Biotech Fund and Amiti, each bringing in their respective expertise. and a research institute that we modeled our model on, which is called BioMedX, and the Amazon Web Service that brings in all the computational and cloud technology. And it's a public-private partnership where we work with the Israeli Innovation Authority and with their support to be able to help achieve our mission of building great startups.
Now, you mentioned that this was something that sort of came out of a role that you had at Teva. I actually didn't realize that. Were you the brain, was this your brainchild, and how did this actually start to evolve?
So it came out of an initiative that actually the catalyzer was the Israel Innovation Authority that recognized this opportunity that I mentioned about the convergence of AI and engineering technologies with biology and chemistry. So first of all, this is actually credit to the Israeli government. I can give a lot of examples of the Israeli government doing things that are wrong. This is something they got right. They set a strategy, they put out vehicles, and they sought partners that would want to create such a venture studio. And the IA, the Israel Innovation Authority, actually came with this initiative. We at Teva, when I was there at the time, were in the midst of actually helping to build up a new innovation strategy to build future growth engines for Teva Pharmaceuticals, actually at a time when Teva was at its worst financial crises after a failed acquisition, and starting to look at how we could bring in new science and new technologies. And so the initiative that the government came with actually fit our agenda of trying to bring in AI and machine learning capabilities into our efforts. And we identified this as it wasn't me. It was me and a bunch of team members. It was 2 other team members and colleagues from Teva that we then pitched it to Teva management and then pitched it to a bunch of colleagues at all the organizations that ultimately joined Ion Labs. And really as a brainchild that was built over hundreds of hours of Zoom back in 2020 during COVID, that amongst 6 different organizations that really came together to found Ion Labs, and then Amiti joined us later on, and that's how it really started.
And it's kind of wild when you think about even forget Israel even for a minute, just that AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Merck, and Teva are all agreeing to work together.
Yeah.
Seems pretty groundbreaking that they're willing to play so nicely in the sandbox, especially when we're talking about the potential of new drug development, which is obviously what they do and the biggest moneymaker for them. Now, walk me through a little bit about the different cohorts and the way that this has evolved. I mean, as you mentioned, I remember it sort of starting during COVID. It was a slow time, and then all of a sudden around 2022, as COVID was winding down, we started to hear a lot more about Ion Labs and cohorts coming to the country. Yeah. So tell me about some of those cohorts and what have been the foci of them.
Yeah, so what we do at Ion Labs is we try to connect between 3 core elements that are necessary to build a great startup in our environment. Number 1 is that they're addressing a big, validated problem statement that's an industry-wide problem statement that, if it's solved, will be the basis of a great startup. Number 2 is that we have a great technology and team to be able to address that problem statement. And number 3 is that we're the right place. So meaning that we have the commitment from at least 1 or 2 of our pharma partners to help mentor the team, support them from day one, provide them with anything they need, including doing early POCs, or what we call killer experiments, to validate whether or not the technology actually works and to help them get on the path that they can prove their technology actually works in that aspect. So those 3 core elements have to exist in every startup that we build. And then we build them in one of 2 tracks. Either we build them from scratch, starting with a problem statement, and then seeking talented people, what you mentioned, cohorts, to actually come for a competition and compete both with their capabilities, their leadership skills, and their personalities, and their scientific and technology capabilities, but also with their idea. And then ultimately at the end of that competition, everyone pitches to our scientific investment committee, and we choose one to give a $1 million investment to as a pre-seed investment to help them get on the track for building a startup and reaching validation. The other track that we do, in addition to Ion Building with all the cohorts that we do there, is called Ion Seeding, where we said if we have all these competitors, like you mentioned, 4 competitors working together to build great startups in this space in Israel, if we have them all working in the sandbox nicely and compete and collaborating, let's try to take it out for a spin to actually invest in early stage startups from their inception, but that address a challenge that we didn't think of. And there we can have our $1 million investment join a larger round, which we've done 3 times. And in this element, we're happy to make an investment in a great startup coming out of the Weitzman Labs, ready to commercialize, and that other funds can lead and we can join them.
Now, I was just at an event that you held recently. It was kind of a cocktail reception to kick off one of these other cohorts. It was for AI, the use of AI in drug combinations and determining drug combinations. So tell me a little bit about this concept. Why was this specific initiative one that you chose? Why was the problem you chose to focus on?
So we called it generative AI for target combinations. So basically one drug that can tackle multiple a combination of targets within the human composition. And that's a huge industry-wide problem statement. Now, it was a problem statement that was defined by members of my team on the scientific side that lead up these efforts with the pharma R&Ds. And they worked with the head of this space within AstraZeneca R&D. They identified this problem statement. They worked with him. He's not based in Israel. He's based in Sweden. He's a Japanese scientist based in Sweden. They worked with him to define the problem statement. And then he pitched it to the rest of the competitors and to Amazon and the VCs. And they all selected this as a big problem statement that if it was solved, and it's a very tricky one, if it is solved and you're able to build a technology to address it, has unlimited potential to develop new drugs and to work with the industry in that aspect. So the 15 people, actually 17 in this case, because we made exceptions because we had so many people applying this time, we brought in 17 candidates that worked with us for a week. We kicked them off with a cocktail to kind of convince them that things would be nice. But then the first day was a workshop. The days 2 to 5 were what I would call a boot camp because they didn't sleep very much. They worked very hard. They challenged themselves. They got a lot of feedback. All the mentors that are experts from the pharma teams worked with them, giving them guidance, and from Amazon, giving them guidance on what their solution could look like and how they could solve the problem. And ultimately, at that end of that week, we chose one, and we're in the process of building a new startup with them.
And so, it seems like one of the reasons that you need to do this is just because the pharmaceutical industry, while it's very large and very well funded, is also very slow and very inefficient. And also, most drugs don't even make it to market from, remember, 95%, correct me on the percentage. So, how do you think that your model, what you're doing, is going to solve that bigger problem?
So, ION Labs, just like any startup, has a great problem statement. Our problem statement is that it takes well over 10 years, over $2 billion on average, and with a 90% failure rate, like you correctly mentioned, of a drug candidate to actually be approved as a drug and be administered to patients. Now, that means that there's a lot of great science that is taking way too long or is not ultimately reaching patients to be able to provide them with health and with a therapeutic effective drug. And so that's what we're trying to solve, is by bringing in technology that is computational based, that has not been used in the past in our industry, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, computational biology, computational chemistry, and combining that with the classic ways that we develop drugs, we're going to be able to shorten that timeline and bring new drugs to market and lower that failure rate. So that could be by understanding disease mechanisms in a much more advanced manner, and a lot of the target discovery goes to that with the challenge I mentioned. It could also be in the way that we actually find a molecule and discover a new molecule that will target a drug, and that could be in biologics and antibodies that are more complex molecules, in small molecules that are chemistry-based, or as well in new modalities like cell therapy and the way that we edit cells and gene therapy and the way that we use CRISPR to engineer genes so that we can actually treat disease in a personalized manner for people and for rare diseases that currently don't have any hope for them. And then all the way through clinical development.
Now, you called ION Labs a venture studio, and I'm wondering how it's that a venture studio is different from, let's say, like a standard incubator or an accelerator.
Sure. So a venture studio is when we come and build startups from scratch, and we provide them with all the services and the support for them to be able to actually build a startup from scratch, and not just, which is obviously hard in its own right, but an investor usually goes out and finds a technology and then provides them with capital and support for them to reach their next stages. Here we provide them with the industry and domain expertise, which we felt, especially in Israel, where this is still an underdeveloped industry here, biotech in Israel. We felt that especially in Israel, it is important to bring in this domain expertise from pharmaceutical leadership, from R&Ds of pharma that are not based here yet in the manner that we see in every other industry in Israel. We felt that it was important for us to be able to provide them with support that's not just managerial, administrative, talent sourcing, and financial support, but also scientific support from day one so that we can bring in the best AI and technology experts that Israel has to offer into the domain of biotech, which is a very hard industry to succeed in as is. Here we want to help them with co-developing so that they can pair their AI expertise with the domain expertise of the pharmaceutical leaders that we have in Ion Labs.
Yeah, I mean, and you touched on something that's actually, I think, important for us to describe to our viewers and our listeners, which is the idea that Israel, we're known as the startup nation, and people are always praising our use of technology and the R&D and the development. But when it comes to biotech, we actually have not been leaders. We've actually kind of been lagging behind for probably a number of reasons, which I'd love for you to touch on. But one of the things that I found really fascinating at this event the other day was how everyone was speaking about how this could shift for Israel, and we could see a much brighter and bigger and even leadership future in biotech as we start to merge more AI or technology with bio. So talk about that. Why were we not leaders, and where do you see us going with all of
Sure.
this?
So I'll start with why we were not. And just to give you a story, so when the CEO of Teva, for the first time a non-Israeli CEO, came in 2017, late 2017, 2018, Kåre Schultz, who had worked for decades in the industry, in Novo Nordisk, in Lundbeck, where he was a CEO. He then came to Israel. And I asked him in our first meeting on his first week of the job, I said, have you ever been to Israel? And I thought his answer would be no.
Okay.
And actually it was yes. He surprised me. He had been coming to Israel since he was 15 or 16 years old as a volunteer on kibbutzim from Denmark.
Okay.
So he loved Israel. And he loves Israel. And then I asked him, have you had interest in investing in Israeli biotech, in Israeli pharma innovation? And he said, and I remember this vividly, he said, Mati, I am a big believer in the startup nation, but it's not for pharma. Now, this was his mindset as a pharmaceutical industry leader that had been coming to Israel at least once a year for decades. Wow. Now, why did he say that? Because Israel is a relatively young country, working with the pharmaceutical industry that's a legacy-driven industry that's been around for hundreds of years. Right. Israel's been around for less than 100. So the fact that we have Teva that has come out because of the Israeli science and ingenuity here that in business models is a minor miracle, just like our country is. But we have one Teva. And Teva never really forward integrated into people leaving Teva and then creating startups. And that's something we're going to try to address. So at the moment in Israel, we have all the ingredients. We have a great healthcare system. We have data. We have great talent, both on the bio and the tech side. And we have interest from global pharma to invest in Israel. But we haven't yet built up the industry. Now, what are we missing? We're missing capital at an early stage. We're missing talent that's experience, a whole cadre of CEOs that have actually built biotech companies and then gone on to build their next one and the next one and the next one. That's something we're missing because it's still an industry being built. And that is all going to be built. Now, even Kendall Square that I think we discussed.
That's
Kendall Square is in Boston. It is known now as the Mecca of the biotech industry. That's where the most investment goes into, and that's where all the pharmaceutical industry has all their R&D centers in Boston and pretty much a very small area around MIT and the Harvard and all the different science and universities that are there. They've all kind of established their centers there. Now, 40 years ago, that was swampland. 20 years ago, it was starting to be built and established. Right now, 40 years later, it is the place to do biotech research. Now, if we look at Israel and we say 10 years ago, Israel was irrelevant for global pharma, just like we mentioned in my conversation with Kåre Schultz. Right. We're now 10 years later, we're starting to become relevant. You're starting to see a whole cluster of startups being grown. You're starting to see new startups come out of academia. You're starting to see more investment come in over the last few years. And multinationals, despite everything that's gone on here, multinational leaders like Pfizer, like AstraZeneca, and others, starting to invest here, some for the first time, Sanofi, some for the first time. And in 30 years from now, if we continue on this track, we will be one of the top hubs for biotech research outside of the United States of America. We don't need to replace Kendall Square in Boston, but even within 10 years, we can be one of the top 10 hubs for research in the biotech space outside of the United States of America, and that will be huge, both for Israeli science as well as for the industry here, for jobs that are created, for income being brought into the country, and for the capability to actually develop drugs that, just like Copaxone, that was developed by Teva based upon science from Weitzman and helped treat multiple sclerosis and turn it into a treatable disease, where 40 years ago was a fatal disease, and now it's a treatable disease that you can live with and have a relatively good life with. That's what we want to do in our industry, and that's what's unique about what we do here.
And AI is going to be able to help that, I would assume, because we have so many leaders in technology that this merging is really going to push us, could potentially push us over the edge.
So what's critical for us in Israel is to combine the great research and continue to invest in great research coming out of academia, but to combine that with the leadership in technology and artificial intelligence that Israel has to offer.
Incredible. Now, I want to talk, though, a little bit about some of the present-day challenges, because unfortunately, we don't live in just the biotech bubble or, in our high-tech industry here. We live in a country where we have been struggling. I mean, I have to take COVID even out for a moment. That was enough for the world and certainly for Israel. But then very soon after we started to recover from that, we started with the October 7th massacre and this ongoing war that has been almost 22 months, as well as then, of course, the Iran-Israel war, which also 12 days, but had tremendous impact. Many of our leaders, the younger leaders in the startup community, are in reserves. How has all of this impacted the marketplace? I mean, are you feeling that people are either hesitant to come here to work with us, don't want to invest, or are the people locally they don't have the energy left after all the Miluim, all the reserves?
Yeah. So I also did reserves for about 4 months in total since October 7th up north. Yeah. And just like everyone else, and we've had people within our startups that have been called up time after time after time. It's not easy. Yeah. Let's start with the good. Okay. We have 8 startups out of the 9 that we've created at Ion Labs, with 2 more being built this year. We create 2 to 3 every single year. And all 8 of them were established and launched since October 7th.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you say established and launched, that means they've got the next round of funding, or
They were either got the first round of funding or got additional funding since October 7th.
Came from Ion.
Just in the last 2 years.
Amazing.
So each one of those have been launched since then.
Okay.
It has not stopped our operations as Ion Labs, October 7th, even a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't make it harder. Yeah. So one of our goals was to bring in talent from abroad to build startups in Israel. That's obviously not as possible as it was 2 to 3 years ago. We do have, out of our 8 startups, 3 that were built by non-Israeli, non-Jewish entrepreneurs that chose to build their startups in the Ion Labs Venture Studio in Israel with Israeli teams, and all their teams are Israeli.
Okay.
And so they're Israeli companies built by non-Israeli entrepreneurs. Some were supposed to move to Israel and just didn't after October 7th. So having to manage these startups in a hybrid manner has obviously been a challenge. Yeah. But that's a challenge that is a minor challenge in the grand scheme of things. And in any case, we're in a global market. No Israeli biotech startup can actually stay just in Israel. So it just kind of catalyzes the process where you have to build hybrid management teams from day one instead of waiting 2, 3, 5 years and then starting to build it down the road.
So what about your global partners, though, AstraZeneca or Pfizer? I mean, I know, like, for example, Merck, as you said, had been here for many, many years. AstraZeneca, just a few years ago with Ion, made its first R&D investment. Pfizer has been, I think, kind of both, right? It's longer, not as long as Merck, but certainly not as new as AstraZeneca. Are any of them expressing, though, concern or feeling like, do we want our name associated with this right now? Has that been a challenge at all?
Not at all. Actually, I was surprised after October 7th for the amount of outpouring of support I got from our partners that had got to know us, and tens, if not probably a couple hundred R&D experts from around the world, everywhere from Asia all the way through the United States and everywhere in between, reached out to offer their support and to ask how we were doing. They had felt that they were part of the Ion Labs family in a broad sense of the manner. We got them all on a Zoom call 4 days after October 7th. They all re-expressed their commitment to continuing with the mission in Ion Labs, and that's been the same ever since. That doesn't mean that there can't be opinions on a personal level. Like we know in Israel, you find two Israelis, you get three opinions. So I don't think that that's necessarily just an Israeli trait, or especially when you come to work with Israel. You feel very free to express that. But they came here for the science, and they came here for the technology. That was a driver in what brought them here. And as long as we in Israel continue to deliver great science and technology and great business for them, there's no reason why they should stop. And they're not stopping, and they're continuing to build new companies with us. And I'm very proud of our partners because they've been amazing.
It's very impressive. I mean, I have to say, because you certainly hear a lot about like the silent boycotts and people maybe choosing to sort of take kind of a step back, and so it's really wonderful to hear that kind of information. Now, I'm also kind of wondering on the other side, the government has obviously spent a tremendous amount of money on this war and has had to invest. And they say that will lead to further innovation, of course, down the line. But currently, we're still fighting this war. Has the government had to drop any investment that it was already providing, or do you feel in general, because I know we have a lot of private investment here, that the government invests enough in innovation to drive these kind of markets forward?
So we have not been, our investments have not been cut at all.
Okay.
They've all been earmarked well in advance, and the government's a strong backer and believer in what we do. So thankfully, and we very much appreciate all the support we get from the government, which is not the majority of the capital. For every dollar that we've received from the Israeli government, we've brought in $4 of private investment, either in Ion Labs or in our startups.
Is that standard, just out of curiosity? No,
okay. That's not standard, but within 3 years of operation. Really.
Okay.
So that's something that we've been able to build as a traction. That being said, to your second question of is the government doing enough? So first of all, we're very appreciative of what they do. And I think as an industry and a high-tech industry, not related to Ion Labs, but as a high-tech industry, had we not had the Israeli Innovation Authority that injected capital into the startups right after October 7th and decided to double down their efforts with the support of the Israeli government, our high-tech industry would be in a different place because that needed that capital to come in and take the place of private markets that were not investing as quickly, because what venture capitalists do is they acknowledge where risk is existing. And obviously, if there's a geopolitical risk, that can have the same effect as others. So the IA has been tremendous in that aspect. Do they do enough? Not just the IA, but the Israeli government? I would say probably not. And that comes to the question of when you need to cut a lot of money in order to balance a budget or reach a point of a budget at a national level, just like we had to go through at Teva 7-8 years ago, you also need to create growth engines. Now, where do the growth engines of Israel come from? Israeli academia, Israeli education, and the Israeli high tech. Those are the growth engines. So any dollar put in and any cut to any of those budgets is going to go directly against the capability 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to actually build up a model society and a strong economy that will help do great things in the world and bring new science and technology. And science and technology, as we all saw during the recent war, especially over the last 12-day war, are at the core of everything that we were successfully done, even in the defense aspect, in protecting our home front, in all the military successes and intelligence successes that we had. Science and technology are at that core. Coming out of the same universities, I'd also know how to build great startups in the biotech space. So we need to invest more in our universities. I'm very concerned that the budget by the government was cut for the universities. We saw the damage at the Weizmann Institute. We're going to need to rebuild that even stronger than it was before. Philanthropy can play a role, but the government needs to take the leadership there in investing even more than we have in the past into the growth engines for the future of our country.
100%. And we're going to run out of time, but I do want to ask you one more question. You know, if you were one of these young or even not young founders or researchers, somebody thinking to jump into this industry, they want to apply to Ion Labs to be a part of it, what kind of advice would you give them to get them ready so that they can be a future leader in this hopefully growing and robust industry in the state of Israel?
So I would say three things. Number one is fall in love with the industry, because our industry is the only one that you can actually solve big challenges, right? Connecting biology and technology is very hard. So these are tough challenges. There's nothing a great technological entrepreneur likes to do more than to prove that they can do the impossible. So this is an industry, number one, you can prove to do the impossible. Number two, fall in love with the industry, because when you are successful, it's the only industry that you can actually, by definition, bring great to the world and leave a positive impact in the world if you're successful. And you could be very successful financially, but by definition, if you're successful, you will also leave a positive impact in the world. And this is the only industry you could say that. There's a lot of industries you could do a lot of good in. This is the only one in healthcare, in biotech, that by definition, if you're successful, you will do good for the world. And number three is recognize, out of a place of deep humility, the need for domain expertise. So it could come from a format like Ion Labs, or it could come by partnering with a great scientific expert. If you're a technology expert, find your bio expert that you can partner with from day one, and understand it's going to be very hard, very long, and you need that expertise in order to be able to overcome the hurdles on the way.
Yeah. Well, Mati Gil, CEO of Ion Labs, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. This is great.
Back to ILTV on the hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. The United States is pushing forward a draft resolution at the UN Security Council that details Trump's comprehensive plan for the Gaza ceasefire. The UN will vote Monday on the draft that is framed as, quote, a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. This signals a major shift in Washington's perspective of a Palestinian state, although it does include conditions such as crucial Palestinian Authority reforms and reconstruction efforts in the enclave. Trump aims to have his plan approved by the UN Security Council in a joint statement with Arab nations that support his 20-point plan for post-war Gaza governance. The statement contains details of an international security force to enter Gaza and achieve the war goals of demilitarization of the Gaza Strip and the disarmament of Hamas, a move that has not yet been completed. But although the plan coincides with Israel's original war goals, Jerusalem has now responded to the draft resolution, and it's not positive. Speaking at the weekly cabinet meeting in Jerusalem, Netanyahu had this to say.
ההתנגדות שלנו למדינה פלסטינית בשטח כלשהו מערב לירדן, ההתנגדות הזאת קיימת ושרירה, היא לא השתנתה כהוא זה. אני עודף את הניסיונות הללו כבר עשרות שנים, ועושה את זה גם מול לחצים מן החוץ ולחצים מבית, אז אני לא זקוק לחיזוקים וציוצים והרצאות מצד איש. הנושא של אי פירוז לכאורה של החלק של עזה שנמצא בידי החמאס. לא יהיה דבר כזה. גם בתוכנית 20 הנקודות או בכל דבר אחר, השטח הזה יפורז והחמאס יתפרק מנשקו. או שזה יקרה בדרך הקלה, או שזה יקרה בדרך הקשה. כך אמרתי אני, וכך אמר גם הנשיא טראמפ.
Trump's involvement in the Middle East continues to push ahead, with his plans to normalize ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia seeing a significant push. His plan? Selling F-35s to the Saudis. Speaking aboard his Air Force One, Trump confirmed that Riyadh wants to purchase, quote, a lot of F-35s. The push for a deal between the U.S. and the Saudis comes just days before Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman arrives at the White House for high-stakes talks. The report says Trump told the Crown Prince in a phone call last month that now that Washington has brokered a ceasefire in Gaza, he expects Riyadh to take steps toward normalization. U.S. officials say the message was clear. We delivered what you asked for. Now it's your turn. The White House meeting on Tuesday is expected to focus on a possible U.S.-Saudi defense pact. Israeli officials argue that regional cooperation with the Gulf could transform the Middle East, but not at the cost of Israel's security. Defense officials are closely monitoring the talks, with Israel's qualitative military edge protected by U.S. law. Any transfer of advanced F-35s to Saudi Arabia would require strict safeguards. Officials stress the concern is not only the current Saudi government, but long-term regional risks, including future regime shifts or foreign intelligence penetration. The ceasefire in Gaza has been holding over the weekend, but not without incident. The IDF confirmed the elimination of a terror operative who crossed Gaza's yellow line and entered the IDF-controlled area. As the terrorist approached troops, he was quickly identified and eliminated. The IDF added it remains deployed in Gaza in accordance with the ceasefire guidelines and will continue removing any threats. Troops of the Shimshon Brigade, together with Yahalom IDF combat engineers, demolished a kilometer-long tunnel. This in the footage that you are seeing on your screens now. This underground tunnel was used by Hamas terrorists to kill 3 IDF soldiers of the Shimshon Brigade exactly 11 months ago. It's very cool to see the demolition of the tunnel, which took the lives of 3 brave soldiers. And that is a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Don't forget to scan the QR code on your screen now to download our ILTV app for more updates. I am Deva Klein. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you very soon at our next update.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader here back in Jerusalem, and this week we're discussing the Jew ban in Birmingham at the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv football match, which I had the pleasure or displeasure, depending on how you look at it, of attending myself. We'll also discuss the fracture on the American right, where neo-Nazis seem to have gained a foothold within the GOP. Can the party leader stamp out this extremism? We'll speak about this with conservative commentator and author Dinesh D'Souza about the challenges within the GOP. All this now on Axis of Truth. Well, this past week, I went to the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv football match in Birmingham, UK. Not as a journalist, not as a political commentator, but simply as a football fan. Now, mind you, Israeli fans were explicitly banned from this match for absurd reasons, which I'll detail shortly. But I bought my ticket fairly, like anyone else, in the Aston Villa section, and I cheered for them because their fans support Maccabi Tel Aviv and opposed the ban from day one. And yet, because I took a photo wearing a shirt that said Zioness, the horror, I was reported by someone. Someone decided that a word declaring pride in being a Jewish woman was apparently a threat or some kind of violation. Dozens of police officers and security staff from the stadium descended on me to interrogate me about what Zioness meant. They accused me, falsely, of wearing Israeli football gear in the home section at a football game. The horror. It was absurd. Even Aston Villa fans around me defended me and said that she's done nothing wrong. But the stewards from the stadium refused to listen, dragged me out of my seat anyway. Take a look.
Okay, ladies, who's got the actual Israeli football t-shirt on?
Not Israeli football t-shirt. She got a Zionist. I don't have Israeli football t-shirt. None of us. Look. This has nothing to do with Maccabi.
But yeah, but it's Zionist.
Yeah, but it's
Zionist.
But wait.
but it's an organisation and it's him. We're not doing it. Just bear with me a minute. The report I had was that you had a football top on.
Nope,
Okay?
absolutely not.
Let me check with our controls,
Yeah.
and then we'll find out if you can stay or you can go. It's for your safety as much as anything else.
So this was pure discrimination, and it didn't happen in a vacuum. All of this occurred after the West Midlands police banned Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending altogether under the ridiculous claim that they were hooligans after the pogrom that took place against Jews who attended a similar match in Amsterdam. But what they really meant is that they couldn't guarantee Jewish safety in a city where pro-Hamas thugs roam freely. And that is indeed what we saw. Outside the stadium, the real hooligans were easy to find. Hundreds of protesters, many wearing masks in violation of UK law, waved flags of Palestine, even of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and chanted for genocide against Jews and Israel. Some of them held signs that said, "Call the anti-terror hotline if you see a Zionist." These signs were posted all over the city as well, along with others that called Israeli football players baby killers. From the streets, you would have thought that it was Palestine playing a football match that night, but it wasn't. It was just the Jew haters who can't stand the idea, apparently, of Jewish people playing sports. In the end, after I explained that my shirt had nothing to do with football and simply meant a female Zionist, I was allowed back in. But the truth is that the damage was done because this is blatant discrimination. This disgraceful episode shows just how far Britain has fallen. When the West Midlands police literally fabricated excuses and openly discriminate against Jewish or Israeli football fans while ignoring actual extremists on their streets, it's clear that the country has lost its moral compass. This was never about security. It was never about hooligan football fans or racism. It was about hatred of Israel. It was about hatred about a society so cowed by terrorists and mob rule that it punishes Jews for simply existing and wanting to attend a football match. And today I can tell you that I had the displeasure of seeing that hatred up close and personal. Well, our next story this week is also in the United Kingdom and is an example of just how egregious the money laundering has become when it comes to the Islamic Republic. A shocking investigation by the Sunday Times exposed that this week that Ali Ansari, a 56-year-old Iranian banker now sanctioned by the UK for funding the IRGC, quietly built a £142 million property empire across London's most exclusive neighborhoods. And he's far from the only one. Ansari bought more than a dozen mansions on the Bishop's Avenue in Hampstead. It's a street that's known as Billionaires Row, and he did this using a shell company registered in the Isle of Man. He disguised his Iranian identity in doing so, listing himself instead as a resident of Cyprus. But this is not a story about a single mansion or one greedy banker. Ansari went on to purchase an additional £33.7 million mansion for his family, along with 2 luxury flats near Kensington Palace, worth another £36 million. He even had staff quarters attached to each one. All the while, he was allegedly financing the IRGC, the same terror arm of the Islamic Republic behind global assassinations, cyber attacks, the targeting of journalists and dissidents worldwide. Kind of makes you wonder where all that money came from, Well, the UK government finally sanctioned Ansari after his family's private bank collapsed in Tehran under billions of pounds in debt. Officials in London have described him as a corrupt businessman who provided economic resources to the IRGC and to individuals who are working to destabilize other countries, including the United Kingdom itself. And what's truly disturbing is how openly all of this took place. Ansari wasn't even hiding. I mean, he traveled frequently to Britain. He held multiple passports from Iran, Cyprus, and St. Kitts and Nevis, and continued to oversee his sprawling London estates, while ordinary Iranians back home are facing poverty, hunger, and of course, state violence. British intelligence has already confirmed more than 20 Iran-backed plots on UK soil just in the past year. And these operations target journalists, activists, and dissidents who fled the regime's brutality. Yet even as the regime's agents are being exposed, one of its top financiers was quietly living in luxury in London's safest and wealthiest neighborhoods, and many of them still are. This story should really be a wake-up call because it proves that the regime's corruption isn't confined to Tehran. In fact, the regime actually has more influence in London than it does over the Iranian people inside of Iran. It's penetrated deep into these Western capitals, specifically London, aided by financial secrecy, shell companies, and really a lack of enforcement. And sadly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Billions of dollars stolen from the Iranian people have been funneled through the UK and across Europe under the guise of business and investment. The same regime that jails women, that tortures women for showing their hair, that murders protesters for demanding freedom, is laundering its money through Europe, and in particular, London real estate. While the Iranian people fight for dignity and justice, their nation's wealth is being siphoned off by the cronies who live in mansions, drive luxury cars, and enjoy the freedoms denied to all those back home. Even their children attend expensive private schools in the West, while the regime itself rails against the West. Iran's dictatorship is not only exporting terror, they're exporting this corruption. And until the West shuts down these networks, every unchallenged transaction and every empty mansion will stand as a monument to our own blindness. Now, next up, we have to discuss the now viral video of Kevin Roberts, president of one of the leading conservative think tanks in Washington, the Heritage Foundation, in which he defended Tucker Carlson's decision to host neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes, a video that was nothing short of humiliating and a perfect example of the moral decay within parts of the conservative movement. Now, in this clip, which has garnered now over 25 million views, Roberts called critics of Tucker Carlson a venomous coalition, which apparently I'm now a part of. This video he halfway backtracked on only a few days later, but first he doubled down. All this, mind you, while he was pretending that his argument was that we shouldn't attack those who are also on the right. Now, this is despite the fact that Tucker Carlson has spent the past 2 years viciously attacking other conservatives. And don't even get me started on the vile scum that is Nick Fuentes that he platformed. These actions by Kevin were not courage, they were cowardice, intellectual and moral bankruptcy dressed up as some kind of principle. Now, fortunately, the backlash that we saw from some of the true conservatives was immediate. There was a lot of controversy. We saw figures like Ted Cruz, Mitch McConnell, and Ben Shapiro publicly condemning Carlson for platforming this open anti-Semite, Nick Fuentes, warning that giving him airtime wasn't really about free speech. It was about spreading the cancer of hate and racism. Even longtime GOP allies called the episode a grotesque moral failure. But tragically, we also saw that others in right-wing media who chose silence or, even worse, deflection. Megyn Kelly's continued refusal to condemn Tucker Carlson, or even the blatant Jew hatred of Candace Owens, was another display of illogical moral weakness. Now, Owens has repeatedly trafficked in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, blaming Jews for their own persecution. She's parroted extremist propaganda that honestly is completely indistinguishable from that of both the far left and the far right. And she's been spreading unbelievably inappropriate conspiracy theories about the murder of Charlie Kirk. First, she accused Israel. Now she's alluding that Erica Kirk was somehow involved. Yet instead of strong condemnation, Kelly shrugged it off and said she didn't want to attack Candace because she's a young mother. What? You're supposed to be a journalist. That is not journalism. That is enabling hate for ratings and for relevance. This really isn't a hard thing for people to do, to condemn racism. And then, of course, there's Tucker Carlson himself, whose recent embrace of anti-Semitic and authoritarian narratives isn't anything but accidental. Now, his media company was initially funded by Pakistani-Iranian businessman Omid Malik. Carlson claims that he and Neil Patel bought out Malik's stake, but the financial records do raise a lot of questions. Now, according to the available records, what Carlson would have had to pay is in the tens of millions of dollars just in difference from the initial investment, and there doesn't seem to be a conceivable way that Carlson could have afforded that, which of course prompts the question, who made up or what made up that difference in funding? Now, perhaps coincidentally, around that same time, Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump Jr., who was also involved in the establishment of this network, Tucker Carlson's network, began appearing with Qatari officials and even attended the Qatar Economic Forum. Now, Carlson's transformation from American conservative to a populist propagandist for the Islamic Republic, for Russia, for Venezuela even, reveals something possibly far darker than political naivete. It's ideological corruption, and the Heritage Foundation's defense of him shows that the right is being hijacked and subverted from within. If the conservatives in the United States cannot find the moral courage to draw the line at anti-Semitism, then they've really already lost the battle for their own soul. Well, following that story and the crazy developments on the right in America, joining us now to discuss the issue is Dinesh D'Souza. Now, Dinesh is one of the most popular conservative intellectuals in the U.S., as well as a filmmaker and an author himself. Previously, he worked in the Reagan White House, and he's the author of the best-selling book, United States of Socialism, America, and the Big Lie. Today, his new film, The Dragon's Prophecy, explores the biblical dimensions of the October 7th massacre and the struggle we see between good and evil. So as you can imagine, this conversation is extremely timely. Dinesh, thank you so much for joining us today on Axis of Truth. Now, you've been one of the most prominent conservative thinkers, I would say, in the last few decades. I want to get your take on how you interpret what's happening right now in the GOP. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of anti-Semites and fringe, isolationists kind of attempting to take over the conservative movement from within. Do you think that this is the greatest internal threat that conservatives or conservatism has faced, at least since the Reagan era?
Yeah, I do think it is. In the Reagan era, there were safeguards and limits to all this, in the sense that you had, I would say, kind of a group of responsible guardians who, again, didn't try to suppress anybody, but made a distinction between free speech on the one hand and either endorsing points of view on the other, or allowing them respectability in the Republican Party or on the right. So these guardians were people like Bill Buckley, Irving Kristol, and there were many others. Reagan himself was also part of this. He would have no truck with any kind of naked bigotry of the kind that we're seeing today. And it's not just about the Jews. It's racial bigotry. Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, just posted a Halloween photo of his two kids, dressed up, all, looking very all-American and excited to go out and collect candy. And all you have to do is just go down his feed and you see all this abuse, about him being brown and his kids not belonging in America. And so the anti-Semitism is allied with other types of bigotry that are also resurfacing in very ugly ways. And so I think not only is there the risk of chasing away conservative Jews, but also conservative Indians, conservative Blacks, conservative Latinos. I mean, there is no Trump coalition without these conservative minorities that have been moving in the direction of the GOP. So nothing could be more destructive and suicidal, just from a political point of view, to allow this to continue.
Well, the Heritage Foundation, one of the leading moral and intellectual pillars of the conservative movement, they helped shape the agenda of the Reagan and actually also the Trump administration. How did it get to this point with what we saw just in the past few weeks? The defense of figures like Tucker Carlson by Kevin Roberts, who even in that video he released kind of echoed some of these anti-Semitic talking points himself. They've also aligned themselves in some cases with Islamist-backed propaganda networks in some cases. And is this just ideological drift, or is it a deliberate subversion of the right that we're seeing?
This is a hard question to answer because I have known a lot of these parties: Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Bannon, Gates. My first job when I came to Washington, D.C. in 1985 was at the Heritage Foundation. I was the managing editor of their magazine, then called Policy Review. So I'm a Heritage alumnus, you could say. And I think all of this is so difficult to analyze on the basis of motive. It's very easy to analyze on the basis of its effects, which are manifestly destructive. And the motives, I think, vary between these different people and institutions. Uh, so, for example, Candace, I think, has always wanted to be a kind of Hollywood figure. And I don't know if she became enamored with Kanye West, and that was her entree to that cultural sphere, which is actually more important to her than the political sphere. I don't know if that's where she got the virus, I think is what I'm saying. Um, Tucker is a whole different matter. There's been the idea that he's being paid by Qatar, but he's from a wealthy family. He has a large following. He doesn't really need Qatar to pay his electric bill. So it has never seemed to me to be at least an adequate explanation. And yet, Tucker does act like an agent of Qatar, right? In other words, he defends Qatar in his newsletter all the time. Not only that, he's defended Sharia law, which is a very odd thing for him to defend. Societies with Sharia law are a lot more orderly. Um, and so, and he has said that Netanyahu is the main villain of the war with Hamas. So not Hamas. And again, goes beyond disagreements with Israel or beliefs that Israel didn't have had the wrong strategy. Now, Heritage is in a different position. I think what's happened with Heritage, to some degree also with TPUSA, Turning Point, they have gone rather deep into the water with Tucker. And disassociating with him is very difficult. I mean, Heritage has been funneling a lot of money to be a sponsor of Tucker's show, and they have sort of a alliance with the Tucker Carlson network. In their defense, or to say a word on their behalf, this Tucker turn is all fairly recent. I mean, I myself toured with Tucker a year ago in Australia. We spoke in a number of Australian cities. Not a word of any of this came up. And so this is all a new Tucker, if I can put it that way, that we're seeing over the last 6 to 9 months. And maybe Heritage is in a difficult position of not quite knowing what to do now that it's kind of like entering into a legal partnership with somebody you discover that they're a fraudster. And now you're like, what do I do now? So I'm hoping that Heritage is actually looking for a way to disassociate from Tucker. But I think they are very reluctant to do that in a public manner.
Now, one of the things that I found particularly disturbing is this idea that you can't criticize someone because they're on the right. And I know you spoke a little bit about Tucker Carlson already. I personally wouldn't even consider him to be on the right anymore. I mean, he was defending Venezuelan socialism under Maduro just a few days ago. He interviewed Pezeshkian, the president of the Islamic Republic, with really a softball interview. And he says that he hates Christian Zionists when his own father was a Christian Zionist. I mean, I'm not really sure how people are still justifying this as some sort of movement on the right. This isn't anything I certainly ever grew up with in any of the organizations I was involved with. So I guess I'm just confused as to why it would even be difficult to condemn for Turning Point USA, for Heritage Foundation, for Megyn Kelly, for many of the people whom I've long admired, in some cases worked with. Why is it so hard for them to say we disagree with this and these are problematic statements? Because that's not cancellation, it's condemnation. How did this happen? I mean, we're seeing people on the right suddenly behaving like the left.
Yeah, and look, I think the roots of it go back to the fact that there has been so much political repression, deplatforming, censorship. You can't say this, you can't say that. A lot of young people have been sort of villainized for being young and white and male. And let's just say that propaganda campaign, heavy handed as it was, has not worked because a lot of young people went in the exact opposite direction and now began to interpret the more outrageous the thing you say, the more you are giving the middle finger to these elites who are trying to keep you down. This is really the key to understanding the popularity of Nick Fuentes, for example. It's not that people think that Nick Fuentes is Nick Fuentes purports to be an alpha male. I mean, he's unbelievably beta male, right? He's got this high-pitched nasal voice. He looks like any mid-sized woman could like crush him, to the ground. So he's not exactly an embodiment of like Conan the Barbarian, but he is the ultimate kind of middle finger guy, right? And so if you say something is a taboo, he will say it. And I think a lot of young people are like, yeah. So this is the sort of cultural phenomenon you're dealing with now. The idea that all these young people are sort of they have a coherent ideology, they don't. So I blame the Pied Pipers like Tucker who are feeding them that ideology. The ideology is not coming from the bottom up. It's actually being provided from the top down. And that is why the responsibility falls squarely on guys like Tucker who are in a very sort of sly way, advancing ideas without taking the responsibility of defending those ideas. Like, I've never seen Tucker say, all right, let me give you 3 reasons why it would have been really good for us to ally with Hitler against Stalin in World War II. It's because, let's just say, Hitler was not a threat to Europe, Stalin was. Hitler wasn't going around invading other countries, Stalin was. Now, all of this is the opposite of the truth. So you can't make that case. So he doesn't bother to make it. He simply brings it out of a guest. He agrees wholeheartedly. He acts like it's a very profound insight that has been suppressed for decades. This is the modus operandi that we're dealing with. And I think what is heartening, I think, Emily, is that when I first went out against Tucker, no one was condemning him by name. People were disgruntled, but they were afraid to take him on, partly because they saw him as too deeply embedded. He's got Trump's cell phone, and he's close to JD, and he's got a massive following. But I'm happy to say that now pretty much the entire mainstream of the conservative movement is up in arms about all this. I think even Heritage is in full-scale retreat, although they're treating it, I think, regrettably, not as a moral problem, but as a crisis management problem, which reflects a real weakness at that institution.
I want to ask you a little bit about the Dragon's Prophecy, your new film. It makes the moral and biblical case for Israel. And unfortunately, today, I think we see Christianity sort of being twisted, mostly by political actors, to justify hatred of Jews or even other forms of anti Semitism, in some cases, even sympathy for terrorists. How did this inversion happen? And what do you say to Christians who are being misled into thinking that this hostility to the state of Israel is somehow an expression of faith?
There's a scene in that film, this is toward the end, where my wife Debbie and I are baptized in the Jordan River. Now, this is a very innocuous thing that we did before there was any of this controversy. And yet, symbolically, look at what it shows. It shows, first of all, our connection as Christians to the land of Israel. I mean, that Jordan River has been flowing since ancient times. It's the same water. It also happens to be the same water in which Jesus was baptized. And so this emphasizes that it emphasizes the Jewishness of Jesus, someone who's raised in a Jewish household, taught in synagogues, bathed in the pool of Siloam, along with the countless other Jews, walked the pilgrimage road to the temple. So, despite the universality of God, and of course Christians believe in the universality of the message of Jesus, nevertheless, you can't deny the particularity of that same God. He chose a particular people at a particular time in history. So, in that sense, God's presence in the world, we understand as Christians, was manifested in a very particular way. I think it was one of the popes, it might have been Benedict or John Paul, I don't remember, who said it is the Holy Land for everyone, but it is the promised land only to the Jews. That's the mainstream Christian position. Now, admittedly, over centuries, there have been renegade groups that have tried to separate the Jews from the Christians, the Old Testament from the New. By the way, the latest practitioner of this dark art was the Nazis themselves, who needed Christian support, particularly in Munich and those parts of Germany, and so they needed a Christianity, and so they sort of adopted what they called positive Christianity, which was an attempt to kick out the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures out of the Bible. and claim, in a sense, an earlier version of replacement theology. So isn't it amazing that this exact same sort of doctrine and heresy is back and is being pursued by people who have, well, something of a similar agenda?
Yeah, disappointing, I would say, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. I know your film also draws a parallel between what happened on October 7th and also the ancient biblical wars that we read about between Israel, or I should say the Israelites, and the Philistines. Do you see today's ideological and spiritual battles, even inside the West, not just in the Middle East, as a continuation of that same moral struggle between good and evil?
Yes, I think that in ancient times the battle was fought mainly on the battlefield, and so the Israelites had to put on the armor and face the Philistines, either individually as David did with Goliath, or collectively on the battlefield. Today, it's a more complex battlefield because the battlefield is partly military, as we see in the war between Israel and Hamas, but it's also cultural, it's moral, there's a propaganda war going on, and also the enemies are more complicated. Even though there is a, even though the Palestinians and the Philistines, that's kind of the same name, they're not actually the same people. They're motivated differently, right? The Palestinians do it in the name of Allah. They are Muslims. They claim themselves the mantle of God. The Philistines, of course, were pagans and worship multiple gods. You also have inside the West this phenomenon of a cultural left that is politically allied with these radical jihadis. A very odd alliance. Some people have called it the Red-Green Alliance. It's particularly odd because those two groups cannot inhabit each other's worlds. And and God forbid, if you and I were defeated and we were out of the picture and they control the world, I think they would start chopping each other's heads off. Only one side would be left standing. So that macabre, that is exactly what happened in Iran, and the jihadis won. So that's an excellent point. So yes, I do think that it's a spiritual war, no less now than then. Although I think that the weapons and the landscape of the battlefield is broader and somewhat different.
Well, exactly, and that's what happened in Iran. The last question I want to ask you for today, in the dragon's prophecy, you call for Christians and Jews to return to their roots and to stand united. I think it's more important, perhaps now than ever, in particular this week, at least than it has been in a long time. But what does that actually look like in practice? And can the moral alliance between Christians and Jews survive this wave of anti-Semitic, I guess, infiltration and more importantly, political manipulation that we're witnessing right now?
The need for it is very obvious both on the political and on the spiritual level. So in other words, if the devil, which is the dragon, is resurrecting the ancient enemies of Israel, in an effort to attack not only, by the way, the Jews, God's chosen people, but also what the film calls the spiritual Israelites, which is to say the Christians who are, in the words of the Bible, engrafted onto the tree. So, in other words, this is the spiritual case for Jews and Christians to come together. But look, even if you were to set aside the Bible and the spiritual argument, if there's a red-green alliance, it's united by one thing: hatred of Jews and Israel on the one hand, and hatred of Christians and the principles of America and the West on the other. So it's not very hard to see why the hated groups need to come together against the bad guys, right? Against the devil's platoons, if I can put it that way. This is what makes the right-wing effort, the perverse effort on the MAGA right to drive a wedge between Jews and Christians, a wedge between America and Israel, all the more baffling. And I think that even though we could give rational and even secular arguments for why that's come about, in the end, I think that there is a sort of diabolical or spiritual root even to that. In other words, the dragon is operating not only with the jihadis, not only with the cultural left, but I'm sorry to say, also right of center on our own side, sowing the seeds of division and hatred.
And just for our viewers, how can people watch this when it's available?
The website for the film is thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. You can stream it on a number of platforms. And it's also available in DVDs on Amazon and also from that same website. So it's The Dragons, plural, prophecyfilm.com.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Dinesh D'Souza. Absolute pleasure to have you on.
My pleasure.
And now for our good story of the week. For the good, the bad, and the ugly, IDF soldier Jonathan Carton was speaking at a student supporting Israel event in Toronto at TMU, only to have an anti-Semitic mob raid literally the event and assault him. Now, while security was unable to control these violent thugs, Jonathan took action and expelled physically many of the rioters himself. Take a look at this hero. Well, our bad story of this week, Birmingham wasn't enough for the freak show that has become the anti-Israel movement. A recent push from countries like Slovenia, Ireland, and Norway shows an effort to expel Israel from FIFA and UEFA because clearly Jews playing sports is just unacceptable. This isn't the first such attempt, but as more countries are joining on this bullying campaign, concerns are rising. Their justifications are that some teams play over the green line in parts of Judea and Samaria, and that there are not what they called anti-racism measures. Now, keep in mind that the Israeli national football team is composed of Arabs and Jews, and the captain himself was a Muslim Israeli, but apparently that's not enough for these obsessive Jew haters. Shame on them. And last but not least, our ugly story of the week. And no, believe it or not, it's not actually socialist jihad lover Mamdani winning the election for mayor of New York City, but it is related. Within 24 hours of the election, one of the largest schools in New York was defaced with swastikas, and Mamdani's response was to condemn the actions, despite his previous anti-Semitic associations and statements. The best part of all of this, however, was that the founder of the pro-Hamas group within our lifetime, Nirdin Kiswani, who's led countless blatantly anti-Semitic demonstrations in New York, was furious with Mamdani for condemning anti-Semitism. She then went on to imply that anti-Semitic attacks are merely false flags and that there isn't a problem of anti-Semitism. Now, keep in mind, these are the same types of people who got Mamdani into office. There's a reason that we saw people like former squad member Jamal Bowman, America Deserve 9/11 streamer Hassan Piker, and of course Hezbollah fangirl Rania Khalik at Mamdani's victory party in New York City. So to see them already turning on their own, it's very satisfying to watch. Sad for New York, though, as the city is definitely lost under Mamdani. Well, that's it for this week on Axis of Truth. Of course, we'll be back soon with more interviews and stories from the Middle East and beyond. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. And thank you for watching. See you next week on Axis of Truth.
And moving on now to another story. As Rosh Hashanah ends, we reflect on new beginnings and fresh starts. And for thousands of women in Israel facing unplanned pregnancies, one organization, Efrat, provides hope, support, and real choices, helping them bring new life into the world with dignity. Joining us now is Neil Salomon, Executive Director of Efrat, to share how the organization is changing lives and how viewers can make a difference. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Neil, for viewers who may not know, what is Efrat's mission and why is it so important?
Efrat's mission is singular. It's to help pregnant women who are being pressured to terminate their pregnancy, usually for financial reasons. We're there to give them pause, to allow them to make a decision void of any external pressures. If it is finances that are hindering their choice, we're there to stand by their side. If they feel having another child is just too burdensome financially, we're there to help them.
Incredible. And so can you tell us a little bit about the people and effort involved in sort of collecting, providing, and delivering support ultimately to these women?
So Efrat's been around for about 47 years. We have volunteers in every single neighborhood of Israel, and that's really where we meet our women. We don't actually bring them in. Our headquarters are in Yerushalayim. We don't actually bring them into Yerushalayim, but from our headquarters go out over 3,500 packages of assistance every single month. To these women that need help, they get whatever they need. So we have volunteers that come and package it, about 8,000 volunteers that come through our warehouse every single year, and they send out the support to these women. At the point where the women live, a volunteer is there to care for her, from being there for her emotionally, helping out with her children, helping out with the home, and making sure she gets everything she needs. What does she need? So what we've discovered, when it's financially driven, the fear of the additional expenses of another child or her first child are very daunting. So we tell the woman, listen, if you're afraid that you can't afford a crib, a carriage, basic supplies for the baby, we'll take care of that. What do you want? You're already pregnant. It's your choice. Don't let those finances hinder you. So we provide a crib, a carriage, a baby bath when the baby's born, and for 24 months after which she gets to her door every single month diapers, baby formula, clothing for the baby as the baby grows up, so that shouldn't be what's holding her under pressure. Being a mother is not so easy. There's other pressures, but that's where we come in.
Amazing. And could you sort of share the scale of Efrat's impact? I mean, how many women and children have you supported over the years?
So to date, we can say that we've supported close to 90,000 women have their children in 47 years. So there are probably hundreds of thousands of Israelis walking around that are a direct impact of Efrat. But for us, every woman is the entire world. Every child that is born there is an entire world. And every woman, it's very important to note, because the political landscape in America around the abortion issue is so complicated. This is about giving women the actual choice. And every woman who needs the assistance of Efrat actually keeps her child. These children are not being put in foster homes. They're not being adopted. These are women who are choosing to have their baby. If they need support, we're there for them. And then they go ahead and they raise their children. So today, close to 90,000 women, 90,000 babies. We're at the rate of over 3,000 children that we are bringing into this world, 3,000 women that we're supporting every single year.
Incredible. And so how can our viewers help Efrat continue sort of giving hope, giving a future to mothers and to their children?
So the easiest way is, first of all, to go into our website, efrat.org or cribefrat.org, either way. And first of all, learn about us, understand the tremendous impact. I just want to share with you one story, just to highlight the impact. During the war, we felt that we had to meet some of the soldiers that are our children, but we didn't know who they were. So at the beginning of the war, we raised funds to give warm jackets to soldiers all throughout Israel, up north and down south. Now, Efrat is not a war-related organization. However, we needed to do something. And at that mission of I myself handed out these jackets, we actually met hundreds of our children who, when they saw the emblem on our car, because the jackets had to not be branded, when they saw the emblem of Efrat, they said, wait a second, you're Efrat. Unfortunately, we're called Efrat from the abortions. That's what they call us. They says, you know, our mother told us that when she was pregnant with us, it was Efrat that saved our lives. In the middle of this whole ordeal, we raised about 10,000 jackets. A certain man calls me up. He's from the south in Israel. And he says, you know, my son needs jackets you have to provide. I said, okay, but why are you being so aggressive? He was very aggressive on the phone. He says, don't you know who my son is? I said, no, I don't know who your son is. He says, you know, I had a store in the Shuk somewhere in the south of Israel, and we had 2 children, and my wife was pregnant with a 3rd. but we couldn't afford. The business wasn't doing well. We could barely feed our children that were alive. How can we now have another child? I told my wife she has to terminate the pregnancy. And out of nowhere, she said, like out of the sky, a woman appeared and said, listen, we know that you're pregnant. Somebody told us that you need help. We're here for you if you want. She said, what do you mean we're here for you if you want? And she just befriended her. If she wouldn't welcome us in, we wouldn't continue that discussion. But he says, you did continue the discussion, and this woman became my wife's best friend, and she wasn't willing to terminate the pregnancy. She really wanted this pregnancy. But I had no idea how I can provide. And I did not believe a word your organization said. You're going to come and provide me a crib, a carriage, 24 months of assistance. No way. You're probably a bunch of crazy liars that all you want is for my wife not to terminate the pregnancy. And that's just not what Efrat is. We want to restore the choice for a woman. If she chooses to terminate, that's her decision. If she chooses she wants to continue and she needs support, then there are organizations that are willing to support her. So says to me this father, you know who my son is? My son is your son. He's alive today because of the assistance that you provided. When I came home from the hospital, he says to me, I was crying. On the one hand, I was happy I had a new boy, but on the other hand, I did not know where to put his head to sleep. And as I drove back to my house, outside was a brand new crib, a brand new carriage, and everything you promised, you provided. Today, he's in the K-9 unit, fighting in the tunnels in Gaza to protect the entire Jewish people. Aren't you going to provide for him jackets? And in that way, we understood that what we did 21 years ago, today is really populating the next new generation. So these women that needed us at that point in time continued. They might have a fourth child and a fifth child. Their lives continue. But when they needed us most, we have to be there for them. So if any of the listeners understand that impact, come onto our website, efrat.org, and understand that here we can truly make a difference. We can help a woman in her need, and we can build another Jewish family in the land of Israel.
Absolutely. Neil Solomon, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
And the Israel Security Forces said today it arrested around 40 Palestinian terrorists from Bethlehem that were planning imminent attacks against Israelis. Meanwhile, the IDF is conducting a huge two-division exercise in Judea and Samaria in what was described by the Army as an unprecedented drill for operation readiness on the Eastern Front. While joining the exercise, IDF Chief Eyal Zamir also condemned recent violent incidents in the territories in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir visited the exercise in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley, involving the Judea and Samaria Division and the Gilad Brigade. He was accompanied by Central Command Chief Avi Bluth. During the visit, he held a situational brief with field commanders and underscored the importance of operational readiness in the theater. The exercise, Zamir said, is the first of its kind in the IDF. It tests the new Eastern Division established as a lesson from the war. One of the lessons from October 7th is that responsibility for defense and our security concept must change. We prevent threats while they are forming. That is what we are doing here. Zamir said the scenarios we have practiced in recent days are ones we must never allow to happen. Zamir said, we must act to neutralize the threat before it reaches our doorstep. We will reinforce forces where needed to continue disrupting terror and prevent the next attack. The IDF chief also condemned recent violent incidents in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians, saying, I strongly reject these acts. The IDF will not tolerate a criminal minority that damages a law-abiding society. These actions cross a red line, divert our forces from their mission, and contradict our values. We will deal with them severely until justice is served. Video from a recent attack on an industrial zone near the village of Beit Lit shows dozens of extremists setting vehicles on fire. During the incident, 10 vehicles were torched, along with a warehouse and a plastic factory. 4 Palestinians were reportedly injured in beatings and stones thrown by extremist elements. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has now spoken out on the issue of Israeli extremist violence, saying there's some concern about events in the West Bank undermining efforts to maintain the ceasefire in Gaza.
The Genesis Prize Foundation announced last night that the 2026 Genesis Prize laureate is Israeli actress Gal Gadot for her continuous advocacy and actions in support of Israel. More from ILTV's Devil Klein.
Gal Gadot is the 2026 Genesis Prize laureate. Announced Tuesday night in the Genesis ceremony, Israeli actress Gal Gadot was commended for her advocacy and support of Israel and for the victims of October 7th. Gadot joins former Genesis Prize winners, including the likes of Argentinian President Javier Milei, Steven Spielberg, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Robert Kraft, Yitzhak Perlman, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, and many more in this honorable award. Gadot said she intends to donate the $1 million prize to proceeds to help Israelis heal, rebuild, and recover after October 7th. Gadot received immense backlash from fans internationally after posting on her social media calls to return the hostages from Hamas captivity back in 2023. But Gadot's efforts didn't stop with social media. The Israeli actress organized private screenings of raw footage from the October 7th attacks for world leaders, influencers, and top Hollywood executives, spreading both the plight of the hostages and the Israelis impacted by the Hamas massacre. For her efforts, the Genesis Prize Foundation called the actress, quote, a hero on screen and an even greater hero in real life. Congratulations.
And Israeli President Isaac Herzog is currently in Zambia on an official visit to the African nation. He received a warm welcome Monday at the presidential palace, where he held diplomatic meetings and bilateral sessions aimed at strengthening relations. Joining us now with more on this visit and on Israel's broader strategy of deepening ties with African countries is Shiri Fein-Grossman, CEO of the Israel-Africa Relations Institute. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's start with the president's current visit. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the significance of his visit to Zambia?
Yes, this is very an important visit. We haven't had an Israeli president visit Zambia in decades, and the DRC as well. Both the Democratic Republic of Congo, or in short DRC, and Zambia, which is planned is part of the plan of the trip, are very important regional countries. Zambia and DRC both enrich in resources. Zambia more on the southern part of the continent, and DRC being in the center of the continent and being the largest country of the continent, and has the most mineral resources in the countries. Some in very high percentage of the world, what's the resource of the world. So both are extremely important, and also both are strong allies of the United States these days, with an infrastructure project, a very big one that is called the Lobito Corridor, which is a project to connect from the Lobito port in Angola to Zambia. A railway that never existed between Zambia and the DRC to the Copper Belt area of the DRC. It's part of this big competition between China and the US over resources and minerals. So I view it as Israel aligning with U.S. interests, but both Israel's interests, and really strengthening its friendships on the continent. And I have to say, DRC and Zambia are strong supporters of Israel. We've just seen the reopening of an Israeli embassy in Lusaka in Zambia after many years, and we at the Israel-Africa Relations Institute have recommended to do so and to open more embassies throughout Africa. So this is a very exciting and happy day for us as well.
So absolutely, and Africa is an area that, I mean, has largely been neglected by the Israeli government, for example, in the past few decades. But there is a renewed push already from a few years ago to try and improve, to try and deepen relations. I mean, what can you tell us about this and about the importance of Israeli-African relations, especially at a time, you know, when we see some of Israel's relations with other countries that have soured?
Exactly. The time is now. Everybody's competing over Africa's friendship. We talk a lot about the Abraham Accords and its importance. Unfortunately, we talk a lot about a whole lot more, and sometimes I speak about it as well. But actually, the GCC countries are fighting over partnerships in Africa. UAE is currently the greatest, the biggest investor, more than China, in Africa. So everybody's now rushing to be Africa's friends, and Israel should definitely be in the game. Historically, our relationship with Africa started 3,000 years ago with the Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon, up to Golda Meir and Ben Gurion's strategy of helping the young countries. Although Israel was only a young country, it really gave its hand to kind of help the new countries in Africa out of colonialism and to help it grow.
So from an historic relationship to a modern day one, Shiri Fein-Grossman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And in some pop culture news, the most talked about wedding of the year took place Tuesday night. Israeli pop star Noah Kirel and professional soccer player Daniel Peretz have tied the knot in an event full of buzz, fashion, trends, celebrities, and much more. ILTV's Devo Klein has the story.
The wedding ceremony of Noah Kirel and Daniel Peretz is still being talked about today. The Israeli it couple, who were initially accused of dating each other for public relations benefits, have not only shocked the Israeli public by getting engaged last summer, but now have officially tied the knot. You may recognize 24-year-old Israeli pop star Noah Kirel from the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest, where she represented Israel with the song Unicorn, finishing overall third place. But beyond Eurovision, Noah's music career in Israel began when she was only 14 years old. She has since garnered a name for herself in Israel and even broke into the international market just last year. And soccer fans might recognize Israeli goalkeeper Daniel Peretz, who signed with FC Bayern München in 2023. The two were wed in a lavish ceremony, and in attendance, Israel's most notable names in the music and entertainment industries. After the ceremony, the celebrations began, and the music? Mostly Kirel's catalog, with a few popular songs by other artists that were also in attendance. Despite fans that are convinced that Peretz and Kirel's relationship exists only for PR purposes, the newlywed couple is proving them all wrong, with heartfelt photos and videos from the wedding ceremony. A big mazel tov to the two. To ILTV on the hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. The United States is pushing forward a draft resolution at the UN Security Council that details Trump's comprehensive plan for the Gaza ceasefire. The UN will vote Monday on the draft that is framed as, quote, a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. This signals a major shift in Washington's point of the Palestinian state, although it does include conditions such as crucial Palestinian Authority reforms and reconstruction efforts in the enclave. Trump aims to have his plan approved by the UN Security Council in a joint statement that he signed with Arab nations that support his 20-point plan for post-war governance in Gaza. The statement contains details of an international security force to enter Gaza and achieve the war goals of demilitarization of the Gaza Strip and the disarmament of Hamas, a move that has not yet been completed. But although the plan coincides with Israel's original war goals, Jerusalem has now responded to the draft resolution, and it's not positive. Speaking at the weekly cabinet meeting in Jerusalem, Netanyahu said this.
ההתנגדות שלנו למדינה פלסטינית בשטח כלשהו, מערב לירדן, ההתנגדות הזאת קיימת ושרירה, היא לא השתנתה כהוא זה. אני עודף את הניסיונות הללו כבר עשרות שנים, ועושה את זה גם מול לחצים מן החוץ ולחצים מבית, אז אני לא זקוק לחיזוקים וציוצים והרצאות מצד איש. הנושא של אי פירוז לכאורה של החלק של עזה שנמצא בידי החמאס. לא יהיה דבר כזה. גם בתוכנית 20 הנקודות או בכל דבר אחר, השטח הזה יפורז והחמאס יתפרק מנשקו. או שזה יקרה בדרך הקלה, או שזה יקרה בדרך הקשה. כך אמרתי אני, וכך אמר גם הנשיא טראמפ.
And Trump's involvement in the Middle East sees another push ahead, with his plans to normalize ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia seeing a significant push. His plan? Selling F-35s to the Saudis. Speaking abroad, his Air Force One, Trump confirmed that Riyadh wants to purchase, quote, a lot of F-35s. The push for a deal between the U.S. and Saudi comes just days before Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman arrives at the White House for high-stakes talks. The report says Trump told the Crown Prince in a phone call last month that now that Washington has brokered a ceasefire in Gaza, he expects Riyadh to take steps toward normalization. U.S. officials say the message is clear. We delivered what you asked for, now it's your turn. The White House meeting on Tuesday is expected to focus on a possible U.S.-Saudi defense pact, and Israeli officials argue that regional cooperation with the Gulf could transform the Middle East, but not at the cost of Israel's security. Defense officials are closely monitoring the talks, with Israel's qualitative military edge protected by the U.S. law. Any transfer of advanced F-35s to Saudi Arabia would require strict safeguards. Officials stress the concern is not only the current Saudi government, but long-term regional risks, including future regime shifts or foreign intelligence penetration. And the ceasefire in Gaza has been holding over the weekend, but not without incident. The IDF confirmed the elimination of a terror operative who crossed Gaza's yellow line and entered the IDF-controlled area. As the terrorist approached troops, he was quickly identified and eliminated. The IDF added it remains deployed in Gaza in accordance with the ceasefire and will continue removing any threats. And new development on the Lebanese border as multiple Hezbollah violations have taken place over the last weeks. The IDF remains on high alert for any suspect that could pose a threat to troops. The IDF confirmed in recent hours that earlier today, troops identified 2 suspects in southern Lebanon approaching the border area. Warning shots were fired by troops, which led to the suspects distancing themselves, and no injuries were reported. Now, after an initial IDF probe, the suspects were determined as UN soldiers who were patrolling the border. And the event is now being handled through military liaison channels. And that is a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Don't forget to scan that QR code on your screen to download our ILTV app for more updates. I'm Devo Klein. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you again at our very next update.
Israel just took a shocking step. The Knesset passed the first reading of a bill to impose the death penalty on convicted terrorists. No appeals, no judicial discretion. Netanyahu backs it. The timing? Just after the return from Gaza of the body of Hadar Goldin after 11 years in Hamas captivity, and with Iran threatening a surprise attack. Security experts are warning that this law could backfire. Will it deter terror or ignite more legislative and diplomatic division?
Hi, Shalom. I'm Mark Regev, and we're here today for another edition of Israel Undiplomatic. And as per usual, I'm here with my co-host, Ruthie Bloom. How are we today, Ruthie?
I'm good, Mark, but we got to get right to some touchy topics here. Let's begin with the Knesset bill. It passed its first reading to impose the death penalty on terrorists. And by the way, mandatory death penalty. And as it happens, it's only the first reading and it needs 2 more readings, etc. So it could be that this is more symbolic than technical, or it's possible, for example, that the Supreme Court will not allow it, etc. But the reason that it's happening now is that Israel was waiting for all the live hostages to be home and for at least most of the dead bodies to be returned before taking any such steps, for fear that it would endanger the hostages.
So let's analyze this issue. First of all, in Israel, we have the death penalty theoretically on the books, but since 1962, it has not been used, and it wasn't used before 1962 either. In all of Israel's history, since 1948, once we became an independent country, the death penalty has been used only once, and that was for Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. And he is, he's out there alone, and he was, put to death, and his ashes were scattered across the Mediterranean, so his grave wouldn't be a place where neo-Nazis would come and, have parties and things. But Israel has, we don't do death, not for rapists and not for murderers. And with that, we're sort of in the Western consensus. Most Western democracies don't today have a death penalty. The United States, a very important Western democracy, is the only one that has a death penalty.
And not in all states.
Not in all states, and it remains controversial in the United States. It's an issue of debate. So in Israel, like Eichmann, there wasn't a debate. That was clear. This Nazi war criminal, the guy responsible for the murder of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Jews, should have been put to death. The issue of terrorism has been part of the political debate in Israel. Do we put terrorists, death penalty for terrorists, people guilty of gruesome crimes, should they be put to death? It's been part of the political debate in Israel for years now, for almost as long as I can remember. Is it finally serious this time? I'm not sure, Ruthie.
Well, the issue of the death penalty, when you talk about it in other countries, we know the dilemmas about it. The main one being, I think, aside from, we shouldn't play God, or we shouldn't take revenge, we shouldn't behave the way the killers behave, etc. The other argument is, look, we know of people who were executed in the United States, for example, who later it turned out, because of DNA testing and new evidence, that the person was wrongly executed. And that's awful. And there are many people who say, better to let convicted criminals, either be free or be in jail than kill even one innocent person.
I think it's in the Talmud, actually. It's a Jewish thing.
Right. But in Israel, the tricky part is this, and I had my own debates about it, because there are, aside from everything else, death row in the United States. This I know because I watch a lot of true crime documentaries in order to relax. That death row is a much cushier prison sentence than the general population, where criminals are very violent and there's a lot of, rapes and horrible stuff that goes on. Whereas death row has better food, has better conditions. And also, because of stays of execution and appeals, sometimes someone is on death row for years and years before being executed, and sometimes dies before he's even executed. In Israel, there's a big difference, and that is that over the years, we have made the dreadful error of freeing terrorists from jails in exchanges for innocent hostages. I mean, our issue with the enemy is that they know that if they kidnap an Israeli, we'll do anything to get him or her back. And releasing terrorists from Israeli prisons is one way to do it. And before October 7th, one thing we know is, like, the famous case of something like 1,100 terrorists released in the Gilad Shalit deal. Gilad Shalit was taken prisoner in Gaza. He was there for 5 years. And finally, after much, much public pressure, Israel released something like 1,100 terrorists, but among those was Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of the October 7th massacre. And before that, he had been diagnosed with a brain tumor in Israel, and Israeli doctors in prison cured him of it and then released him. So, many, many Israelis who opposed the death penalty altogether, not just for terrorists, but in general, who have an aversion to the death penalty, said, well, as long as they're in jails, somehow the government is tempted to give in to demands, ransom demands, and this is a big problem.
So on the moral issue, I don't think I have too many qualms about death penalty for murderers and rapists and people who've done horrendous crimes. Obviously, there has to be due process. Obviously, there has to be, a total. All the evidence has to be there, right? There can be not even the slightest doubt that the person is guilty of the crime. It has to go all the way up to the appeal to the Supreme Court, all that. Having said that, the proponents of the death penalty say not only is it justice and real justice, but they also say, from a utilitarian point of view, it will help because it will deter terrorists from killing innocent people. And I think there are questions about that. First of all, when a terrorist does a terrorist act, let's say you walk into a supermarket with a machine gun and randomly kill people, or you walk into a coffee shop with a knife and start killing people. I mean, you're taking a very big risk with your own life as well. And so is the death penalty really a deterrent? Even there are some people who kill themselves deliberately, the famous suicide bombers, right? And so if you believe that in dying, you expect to die anyway, is it in any way a deterrent? And I think that's a serious question. What is the deterrent capability of the death penalty? Is it actually going to save lives? And I think there's a whole question mark there with the type of terrorists we've been dealing with and the type of people this is supposed to deter. The security services have argued for years that actually that's not a successful deterrent. What is a successful deterrent, but also another controversial Israeli policy, is like house demolitions afterwards. If people think that their loved ones are going to suffer because of their act, right? If their parents' home is going to be closed or something like that, that actually does work as a successful deterrent. But then when Israel is accused, of course, of these people weren't involved in the crime, they just happened to be relatives of, and so forth. And the Supreme Court has ruled on when you can and can't do housing demolitions. But nevertheless, the security services says that actually works for a deterrent because maybe the suicide bomber or the terrorist is willing to kill themselves for what they think is the greater good, but for the greater terror, yes, for their crazy extreme agenda, yes. But they don't want to see the members of their family hurt. And so the issue here, can you really deter someone who wants to be a suicide bomber, someone who is willing to die for their cause with the threat of a death penalty? And I think it's an open question, and I'm actually doubtful.
No, see, I agree with you. I don't think it's so much a deterrent because, but neither the home demolitions, for example, you say they're worried about their loved ones, but the Palestinian Authority takes care of that by funding terrorists and their families for life. Okay, stipends with money that they have never been able to earn on their own. So it's not clear whether there's a deterrent. But then the question is, again, whether or not it deters them. What it does is prevent us from having terrorists in jails to use as barter. That it does do. It's not a question of deterring the terrorists. First of all, if you believe in jihad against the Jews and Christians and infidel Muslims, why would anything deter you? If you believe that you're a martyr for Allah, why would that deter you? Now, we know that even extremists and even people would be martyrs, many of them have to be given ecstasy pills and things like that to go on their missions because there is a human instinct not to be afraid of death. Okay, it's not as though, plus the people who dispatch those terrorists, they certainly want to live. We know that, the heads of all of these terrorist organizations, they are millionaires and billionaires, and they live it up. At the time of Arafat's death, which was 21 years ago, I believe, today, he was worth some $1 billion. All right, so they send others to kill themselves. So it's true that death is frightening, also, I think whether or not the final death is frightening to people who believe that they're going to have virgins in paradise or whatever, it's pain. All people are afraid of pain. And so getting killed is scary. You might be in, just the idea that you're going to get shot or blown up or something is frightening. But the point is, this is supposed to be a deterrent, unfortunately, a deterrent for Israel not to be tempted to go through this business of releasing terrorists.
So I want to refer to a few things, but on that last point, I'm not sure it's a real issue. Okay, why? Because we'll always have, unfortunately, as long as this conflict continues and we face a terrorist problem, we're always going to have terrorists in jail who are not death penalty people. People who are raising money for terrorists, you're not going to kill them, I presume. People who are educating for terrorism, people who are recruiting terrorists. The person who drives the terrorist to do his murder, is he going to get the death penalty? I doubt it. So you're always going to have a lot of Hamas people in jail who anyway will provide motivation for people on the terror side to kidnap and do other bad things. And so I'm not sure having the death penalty for the few who are the gruesome killers who themselves cut off heads and raped and burned people alive, the people who would probably be liable for the death penalty, they're a minority of this group, right? And so I'm not sure that solves the problem. You raise very rightly the PA, which obviously gives all sorts of financial incentives to the families of terrorists. Yes, they're set for life almost economically in the pay to slay issue, and that was recognized by the United States Congress when they did the Taylor Force Act, because they said if you're funding terrorism, we're not going to fund you, right? And I think it's that's well known. But I think there's another issue. It's not just the money. If you live in a society and your son is a shaheed, he's a terrorist who died fighting the Jews, doesn't matter that he killed 12 innocent people in the process, he's still a hero, yes? Your family status goes up. It's not just the money, yes? Your social status from being an anonymous Palestinian family, you are heroes to the national cause in the eyes of the Palestinian Authority. And that's something that's very difficult, I think, to take away. On the issue of due process, I think there's also a situation where, because you have to do due process, first of all, these people will be in Israeli jails for a long time before they're actually executed, because they'll have to go up, as I said before, to the Supreme Court. And when you've got people, let's say, on death row in Israel, at the moment we've got no one on death row, does that provide additional motivation for terrorists to try to take hostages, to do things, to get people released before they're executed? And so I'm of the opinion, in Israeli, we like to talk a lot. We're Jews. We're very verbal. Our politicians especially so. But maybe is this really going to happen? Or this is just a lot of haraya? Though if you look at polling, it has strong support. A majority of Israelis believe a death penalty for terrorists. But those who've thought the issue through, and you have to ask, will this help? I think that's the bottom question. That's the ultimate, will this help? And I think that it's an open question. I don't think it's clear at all.
So here's the question about this, and then we can talk about an interesting case of 200 Hamas terrorists in a tunnel in Rafah, and we'll get to that in a second. Is it always whether we're deterring something or whether it'll help? Maybe there's such a thing as punishment for a crime, punishment that has to fit a crime. There is something to be said for that as well. And I'll tell you, we know if we leave off terrorism for a minute, think of serial killers, think of Israelis there are these crimes that are so horrific, or against children, all kinds of horrific crimes. And we've seen also a huge spike in the slaughter of wives at the hands of their husbands in Israel. It's not that there are that many, but it's a huge spike in it. And when it started during the pandemic and during the war, it's horrific murders of wives at the hands of their husbands. If you were that woman's family, would you mind? Good, put him to death. He deserves it. I mean, the